Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast, is brought to you by you. If you want to learn how to support our podcast network, head to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother, Dagan Moriarty. Dagan, how are you today, my friend?
Oh, hi. Good morning for Jaffe. And look at this, universes colliding as we do on Constellation.
Yeah, this is a new combination. We haven't done this. This is the 26th episode, and it's a new combination, a new constellation of people. Good to see you, Dag. Jaffe, you had already mentioned, so let's get to you. David Jaffe, my friend. How are you today? Welcome back.
I am pretty gosh darn good. I think I have an earache for the first time in decades. Like, who gets earaches after they're like 5? And I don't know what it is, but I am good. I am great, actually. I'm enjoying the day. You know, let me tell you what's weird really quickly.
Please.
This has nothing to do with my topic, but I never thought I would see the day when an Indiana Jones movie opens, and I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. I mean,
that.
I may see it. Like, I came out to California to make movies because of Raiders of the Lost Ark. That movie changed my life. I was the geek in high school that when Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade came out, I literally got, you know, when you're going to a big sporting event, people like draw on their windshields. And, you know, I had my brother do the logo of Last Crusade, right? I mean, that's how into it I was. And I still love those first 3 movies. But Crystal Skull was such a piece of shit. It was just a piece of fucking shit. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't hold up. And then the reviews of the new one, I don't think it's as bad as Crystal, and I'm a fan of James Mangold. But I'm staggered that I'm not like, nah. Maybe I'll go next week, but I'll probably wait till it hits Disney Plus and just watch it at home.
I hear you.
What the fuck?
I hear you, Jaffe.
Yeah, life, man. Life. I'm more interested in the catching up with the Great. I've been watching that show about Catherine the Great and Peter on Hulu.
I have to check that out. It's a period piece?
It's batshit. It's Elle Fanning and Nicholas Hoult, and it is they have a little asterisk that says kind of a sometimes true story. So it is based in reality, but it is just it's nuts, man. It's fucking crazy, and it's entertaining. It's not like, oh, it's The Crown or Downton Abbey, like where you have to be in that headspace. It's kind of a body soap opera, but it has a lot of historical cool shit too. I think you would enjoy it. It's quite good. It's called
I'm writing it down because I have to get Hulu back because I try to rotate through everything, and I need to get Hulu back so I can catch up on The Handmaid's Tale, which I absolutely adore.
It's too depressing for me. I love it too, but I can't watch any more of it. I just can't. It made me too sad. It made me too, you know.
I can understand that. Yeah, our sister Dana won't watch it for the same reason. She's like, I just can't do it. Which is weird because she loves all sorts of weird shit like that. But
I'm well. Thank you for asking. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome here, Jaffe. Thank you. It's good to see you. And MrMattyPlays finally. Good to see you, my friend. I sent our link today to the wrong email, so we're starting a little late. That's my fault. I'm still very perplexed why we always rely on our machines, right? And so like when I go to politico.com, I just type PO enter, right? And I'm just assuming it's going there. And so when I send emails, I send emails to the same 10 people. Cog, C, enter. Dagan, D, enter. Jaffe, J, enter. You know, it's like, and with you, I sent it to Matt, like a random email, but we think it might be because you shared something from that account with me or something. But anyway, it frustrates me that happened. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I think it's because his first name is Mr. That's the weird thing people don't get about him.
Right.
Yeah, but nonetheless, good to be here, everyone. It's been a while since I've done a Constellation, so I'm happy to catch up with the gang, get to talk with Jaffe for the first time, the legend. I'm very excited about that. So just really excited to kick it. Although I got my hair cut today and I realized something. I've talked about it before, but I wanted to put it here where it's probably more fitting than what I've talked about on Defining Duke. I don't know if anyone feels the same way, but like when I first get my hair cut, I think it looks awful. It's like after a week when the hair starts to settle in a little more, I look normal. But I like Cog is different. When Cog's like, no, dude, day one, like I love the fresh cut. But for me, it's like I look really doofy right now. I look very Karen right now is how I describe it. But then in a week, like I start to look more like myself. But that's the love-hate relationship. Like I love getting my hair cut. It was getting way too long, but then I got it all chopped off. I'm like, like it's not a bad cut. It's just I gotta wait a little bit. You
need that week.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm the only one, but it sounds like you're with me.
I'm with you on first, that. Other than Mika, is this the first woman we've had on Constellation?
That's not the first time I've heard that.
I don't have any hair at all, so I'm just making fun. I'm just teasing.
Well, it's funny because when I look at your hair, you have the kind of hair. Dagan and I both have Italian afros that are unmanageable, right? And I've said before, and I'll show a picture at some point because there's not very many of them, surprisingly. In fact, one of the great pictures is at Dagan's daughter's. I think it's at Dagan's daughter's christening. I grew out my hair for more than a year in college. And I had a fucking huge afro, like straight up afro, like a blowout, straight up. Like there's nothing that can be done with my hair other than growing it out and then shaving it off. And I used to, when I was a kid, I used to covet kids' hairs like yours, man. Like, because you're younger than me, but people used to love getting the bowl cuts and like all the different things. I was like, God damn it. I wanted a bowl cut so bad.
A bowl cut. Wow.
Yeah. 1980, picture it, 1989, right? Like I'm going into the, Sal's barbershop. Sal, by the way, and we've said this before on the show, Sal didn't know my name and thought it was Tommy. So Sal used to call me Tommy from the age of 4 or 5 all the way to when I went to college. That was my name, was Tommy at this place. And you go there and you see all the pictures on the wall and the kids are all getting their different haircuts and you can just go bring, bring, and that's
I've done that one time, shaved my head. I was in 5th grade.
I do it all the time. It's so good, you guys.
Oh, it feels great.
Yeah, I do it to myself. I do it to myself. Oh, I shave my own head. Yeah, I have for many years. Yeah.
I love it. And then people watch the stream and go, Jaffe, why are you touching your head all the time? It feels so good. And then when you take like a cold Coke can or something, I'm not fucking with you, and you put it like on your head when it's shaved, oh my God, it feels good.
Well, I just wanted to say that I want to just rip the hair out of your head and paste it to my own. Scalp you like a Sioux Indian.
You do have good hair, actually.
Good hair. Thank you. Yeah, Thank you. It's funny. I went through like a little hair crisis, because people who went to the first Last Stand Media event will know I kind of almost was like rocking a mullet for a while. And then I kind of deviated from that and cut the back a little shorter. And so, yeah, I've just been experimenting quite a bit lately. It's one of my more favorite things to do, but I think I've settled into what I like, at least for now. But there was that transitionary period. Like when I first started rocking this cut, the comments were brutal, man. They were like, this dude thinks he's in the 90s. Who invited Karen here? Like I was like, oh man, like
Karen is the best.
Yeah, I was like, did I get a really whack cut and I'm the only one who thinks it's good? Like I don't want to be that guy. But eventually, I think I settled into it. It just took a little bit of work, took a little bit of managing. But nonetheless, happy to be here. Sorry about that.
It may be a generational thing. If you're talking about people were giving you comments, whenever I stream, there's always those people in the stream that are like, Jaffe, is that a shirt you wore yesterday? Or Jaffe, your hat's dirty. I'm like, who are you people?
It's like high school.
Yeah, fuck off, man. It's like, first off, what about my stream has suggested to you that this is the place to come to talk about fucking fashion or haircuts, or maybe I did sleep in my clothes last night because I don't care. Fuck you. We're talking about video games. It's the weirdest fucking thing, man.
Dude,
you ever sleep in your clothes?
I sleep in my clothes all the. First of all, the parasocial shit that's going on just on the internet generally, where people just feel like they can say and just know and do anything, and they can just comment on any part of your life, and they have all this input. It's putting me off so badly. It's the reason I stopped posting socially on Twitter in 2021, that I'm almost to the point where I just don't want to be around any of this anymore.
No, you have to embrace it. The social media heckling is amazing. I mean, I'm talking to 3 pretty big YouTube celebrities here, so for me, I could say that easily. But I give it credit. The people that are really funny, and it opens up a whole new segment of comedy that never existed before.
That's a great point, actually. It's
right?
It's crowd work if you're the streamer.
It really is crowd work.
But I agree with Colin. I mean, if you don't got your guard up when you come into that, it'll fuck you.
It hurts.
Fuck you bad.
Yeah. It's just, you just gotta, I've said, I get into this sometimes, but you just do kind of get used to it in some way. Like, and it just, there are certain things that don't bother me at all anymore. Like being called a Nazi or something. It's like, I don't care. You're a transphobe. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know what you want me to do about this stuff. Like, but the like I was saying, it's like the really deep, every once in a while you come across like 1,000-word screed about how bad you are. And that's the stuff that more hurts than like the drive-by, or like people making video. I don't really watch the videos about me, but people are always making videos about me and stuff like that. And it's like, I can imagine that hurting a lot more, and it does hurt. So I don't even subject myself to it. I'm a pretty sensitive person. A lot of people don't think that about me, but I'm actually a pretty sensitive person. I try to treat others the way I want to be treated. But it just bothers me. Not that, I guess, so what I'm saying is it doesn't bother me that people have their drive-by comments, but they talk like they know you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
that's what gets me.
You don't.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm sorry. Like, you know me on this show and we know each other and we have a great relationship through that. But I think sometimes people take it a little too far, and I'm noticing that much more. You know, so when people are commenting on your, like, I would never comment on someone's appearance. Oh my God.
No,
I would be,
it's cliche,
I would be
but
mortified, you know, of saying something like that to someone.
It's cliche, but it's like, typically it's people with, anime character avatars or eggs. And I'm just like, look, my face is out there. I'm not saying I'm hot, but I'm out here, man. Like, come on now.
Right.
But point being, it's to me, the only ones I really dig are actually the long-winded ones. I don't even read. I'm just like, okay, you got way too much time on your hands.
That's not for me. I don't want to read that much.
I want to go read a book, truly, but like not that kind of comment. But like, it's the flybys that act like they're so confident in what they say that they think they're right. I'm just like, ooh. But even that, like, I don't know, there's been a switch that's flipped in me in the last, like, I'd say 4 months, where I really went from like pretty sensitive to this shit to kind of just the switch got flipped off. And I was like, yeah, you can say what you want. Like, I don't know if I just got cold to it, but I just think there was just an acceptance part of it. I was like, yeah, there's just going to be people who have nothing nice to say. And that's just part of what we do here. And it's, there are people who act like they know me, and that's it. Right.
But what's important too, I think, in this conversation, before we get into our first topic, and I'm actually going to begin this week because I want to see what you guys think about this. But
nice.
And it kind of is related in some tangential way. But it's worth noting that, the people out there, and this is just kind of, I guess, steel manning my own argument in some way, but these people have the right to say those things to you too. That's kind of the interesting thing, is like, I would defend to the death their right to tell me I'm a Nazi.
Yeah.
And
I would defend to the death your right to be a Nazi, although I would hate you, but you have a right to be an idiot. That's fine. I mean, a lot of them don't agree with that. It's like, I had somebody tell me that hate speech was illegal and they were in America. I'm like, it's not illegal in America, you moron. Hate speech is not illegal. It is in Europe, in parts of Europe, but a lot of these kids just don't know the basic civics of our American country. Well, that's right. North American country. The point. It's weird to me that they actually would think there are things you can't say as long as they don't, elicit violence, that are illegal. It's like, that's ridiculous. I mean,
what do you guys attribute the uptick to, though? What is this flying off at the social media mouth now suddenly?
Because they have the 0 to 60. They have the megaphone.
Yeah, they can do it.
Mm-hmm. I think
I don't almost blame people.
No, I don't either. But I will say this. Sorry, Colin.
No, please go ahead.
Well, I talk too much. I will say this. The gift of it, though, is that when it stings, it's a gift, because 99% of it flies off your back. The 1% that sticks and stings is a gift, because it's like, oh shit, there's something there I should look into. This person could tell me I'm out there murdering kittens and does nothing, because I don't murder kittens. But if somebody says, Jaffe, you interrupt people too much, you talk too much, it's annoying. In my heart of hearts, I know that's true. I get excited about a conversation. I have ADD. I wish I could be one of those more reserved guys that could just wait, and not only wait my turn, but forget there's a turn to be had, and be so caught up in what someone else is saying that I would shut the fuck up, and maybe the turn I thought was coming doesn't come, because they've totally, I love that, so if somebody says that to me, I'm like, yep, you're right. Thank you for that. Even though you've couched it in venom, the nugget of truth is valuable. Mm-hmm. But 99% of it is like, oh, go fuck yourself. It means nothing to me anymore.
Yeah, I totally understand that as well. And I kind of think everyone's, especially on this show, but just generally in podcasting for so many years now, it's been interesting doing it with so many different people that have so many different styles. Yeah. And I actually think that people have different, equally valuable styles. I think I'm good at staying behind and just waiting till there's a time for me to talk and not really getting too disruptive or whatever, because I have to host the show. I think if I am almost never a guest on a show. So I have to steer it.
Same thing, yeah.
And it kind of sucks, actually. I would love to be. Actually, I think I'm going to be on Matty's show when we're going to have Hogan to talk about the FTC thing, and this is going to get us into our first topic. And I can't wait because I don't have to host it.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, like hopping on one of these is great because I just get to chill for once.
Yeah, just hang,
just talk,
and participate.
Talk, no script. Because like usually what I'm doing, there was actually a comment that did irk me. Someone was like, "Matty needs to pay attention more when Cog's talking because they can see when I switch tabs because my room is so dark, unfortunately, because of my shitty lighting. That if I'm on like Google Docs, my face goes completely white from the lighting of the screen, and it's because I'm usually like looking at the doc, adding things, removing things." And just making sure once Cog's done, like, where do I go next? But people just don't consider that when you're hosting. They think I'm just shooting the shit most of the time. And so that's kind of the beauty of being a guest, right? Is you just get to sit there and chat. But when you're hosting, like Colin, probably better than any of us that, you just got to plan what's next to keep the flow. Because the flow is arguably as important as the conversation itself, just making sure that there's no awkward breaks and that, everyone just stays in a good rhythm.
It's funny because the honest to God truth is, as being a host, and I'll readily admit this because it's just reality, is that on this show, I'm actually really able to engage 100%, right? Like be totally engaged in the conversation. I'm hearing everything everyone's saying. But when I'm doing sacred symbols or something, I'm not. Like there are times where I'm tuned out for 20 or 30 seconds because I'm really like looking something up. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm kicking it over to you for you to say your thing. I'm listening with one ear and I'm like you said, getting the next thing going.
Yeah, no, I have to do the same to Cog for sure.
So
it's tricky. Tricky.
So it's, or like someone said something, and I always do it on the show when someone's like, I'm not sure about that. I'm like, I always say, I'll look it up. And then you hear me mute my box and start looking things up on the internet and all these things flashing on my face as I'm looking something up. So I think people get it. I've said this, I don't know. I said this on a recent episode, maybe of Knockback, where I appreciate the like everyday radio dudes so much more than I used to think that was a fucking joke. Like I loved Long Island's own Howard Stern and we would listen to him and it was amazing. But I was like, this is a dream. It's so easy. And I'm like, man, that was probably really difficult because you have to be hard. Like people are actually really listening. You have to be funny. You know, you have to be on. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life. It's fucking this time and you got to be on. It's difficult.
Yeah. Did you ever see that movie Talk Radio with Eric Bogosian?
No.
From Oliver Stone? Oh my God, dude.
No, I never saw that.
Up. I don't want to. It's based on a true story about a talk radio host in Texas somewhere, and he was about to go syndicated. This is back before there's internet and everything, and he was very political, and he got a lot of people riled up. And it's about his last night on the air, and it's intense and it's great and it's fascinating, and it's called Talk Radio. But the one thing Colin started doing, which I started doing because I felt guilty too, is a lot of times, when I look down and stuff, Colin, now you would say like, okay, I'm writing that down, or I wrote that down, right? Because people don't see your paper until I started watching you, and you show it sometimes. So if anybody's looking at me, I have paper down here, and that's what I'm looking, because I want to take notes when someone says something, so when it is my turn, I can remember that. So, but I'm always very anxious about people thinking I'm not paying attention. But
no, I totally get it, dude. I'm a vociferous note taker too. Just I think by virtue of it's like a weird nexus of I loved writing strategy guides and I was just always writing. I love reading and writing. I majored in history, which was just reading and taking notes and listening to lectures. And then I was a journalist, which was just a lot of note taking and all of that. And so I just think that it's very natural for me to just pull out my notebook and write things down. And I highly recommend it. I'm going to burn them. If I know I'm going to die, I'm going to have to burn all these. But at some point, someone's going to find literally hundreds of these yellow notebooks that are just in boxes because I just don't throw any. I refuse to throw any of them away. But if you read them, they'd be like the screeds of a madman.
Leave them to your kids, man.
I'll have my own papers.
Listen, I got a guy coming on the show soon. He runs a company called You Only Virtual. And he basically their business is to take avatars or make chatbots out of the social media footprints and very targeted interviews with your loved ones. So when they die, there are avatars and chatbots of people who have moved on. So all of those notes, I tell my kids, I'm like, dude, if you ever miss me, I mean, I've got, how many hours of fucking YouTube videos are up that hopefully will be put through that process so they can just be like, all it'll be like, fuck. That's all we'll say, you know. But
I think there was a Black Mirror episode about this a couple of seasons ago, right?
I'm sure there was.
I think
I'm sure there was
a person that recreates their child that died or something through that stuff.
That's exactly right. But this is a real thing now. This is a real. There's like 3 companies doing this. I think it's fascinating.
Oh, sci-fi is reality now, very much.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with the first topic here. This combination. I have a hard time coming up with my topic for this show until I know who's going to be on it. So, when I found out it was this specific constellation of people, I wanted to use this topic because I think it's interesting to have Matty here and Jaffe here specifically together. With this, so this will go live, especially publicly, long after probably the FTC decides, or the courts decide if the FTC will get a preliminary injunction on on Microsoft acquiring Activision. I think the general assumption is that anything's possible, but it's probably not going to happen. I think that seems to be what I've gleaned from it. I think Hogue says something it's like a little less than half and half now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, and I think everyone agrees the FTC did a horrible job presenting their case. I could have presented the FTC's case extraordinarily better, at least from a console point of view.
Just so we're clear, it's a little less than 50-50 that the injunction will not happen.
Will not happen, right. I think Hogue was saying 50-50, and I think it's more like 60-40 now and towards no injunction. It's hard to tell because there's so much propaganda, frankly, about this out there that it's hard to know what's being said. And it's funny seeing that all cycled into, I think about like the Derek Chauvin trial, where like you could be on Twitter and I was actually watching that as it was happening, and you would have just 2 totally diametrically opposed, obviously partisan, pre-fed interpretations of everything that happened. And so it's funny to see games dragged into that. It's nothing new in politics or in the criminal justice system, certainly. But in this is a huge topic, and we spent a lot of time on Sacred Symbols talking about all of it from a data perspective and Game Pass and all these things. And I don't really want to get into any of that here. I want to ask you guys specifically, because we have Matty, who runs our Xbox podcast. We have Jaffe, who comes from the opposite competing ecosystem as a creator. And we have Dagan, who I think isn't really that interested in Xbox or hasn't been traditionally. And my question I want to ask is, and I think I've managed to encapsulate it in this, is how has this brand, in your interpretation, managed to survive the last 22 years when it seems like it has comparatively failed by most metrics compared to its 2 major competitors? In fact, that is its entire case to the FTC, is that it's so hapless in games that it can't do it. I mean, would you disagree, Jaffe? I mean, that seems to be the entire case. It's like, we're horrible. We don't know what to do. We've been losing the entire time. And
yes, but to be fair, though, I think both Xbox and Jim Ryan, who was the major rep for Sony, both of them were kind of underplaying their effect in good and bad. I mean, when Jim Ryan goes up there and is like, no publisher I've talked to likes Game Pass, it's like, really? No one likes game, and just like Xbox, it's like, we're idiots, I mean, it's like they're both kind of trying to sort of steer the narrative. So, but yeah, I would agree with you though, that if you look at Xbox on the whole, they've had one really good generation, which was the 360, which really did for a very long time before. And even though you can argue correctly that PS3 did show up with the numbers at the very end of that quote console war, the 360 owned the zeitgeist of gamers for that generation.
I agree.
And Halo was massive when Halo was out. And that was not 360. That was what the original Xbox, I think. Yeah. And Halo 2. So, I mean, they've planted enough flags that they're not like, you're not talking about, I'm trying to think of you're not talking about the Ouya. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they're not that, but sure. I mean, they've definitely not been competitive at a impact level of the industry as Nintendo and Sony. That I agree, 100%.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to. It's not I should be clear that I'm not making a judgment call. I'm interpreting their own actions and, of course, the actual data. I bring this up because I guess I'm curious. I've made my case, and I'll make a little bit of it here, but we talked about so many other things on Sacred Symbols. But I just want to specifically understand the fandom around the brand, which I from the outside don't quite get the vociferousness of it because I don't know where it could have come from. I guess that's what I want to know. I want to understand it because there's obvious that just because I don't understand it doesn't mean it's not real. Of course it's real. There are tens of millions of people that are, attached to this console and have been. And like you said, 80 million units, Xbox 360 sold, nothing to sneeze at. Stronger sales now, time adjusted than Xbox One. So on the incline, there's no doubt that things are going well for them. And there's also no doubt, in my opinion, that they've done really great work in services, which I think might actually be the answer. But I want to understand from our different perspectives why we think this brand is so sticky. Because, and Matty, I'll go to you first because you definitely see this from your point of view and your fan base, is that I see a very, very worked up Xbox fan base right now that is very on edge and excited about this deal I get with Activision. But I wonder where the confidence. So this is what I'll pitch it as to you. Okay. Where does the confidence come that it will be any better in the future?
It's something I've actually spoke about on Defining Duke.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear your answer.
Yeah, because I think what happened with Redfall is a shining example of how slow these changes come along. That a game that clearly Xbox should have been all over, even if it was creatively contaminated, is how I define it. Xbox should have been involved. They just should have had a hand in it. Even if it ended up being a 60 on Metacritic, they should have been more involved than they were. And it goes to show how slow moving it was. We now learn through some of those emails, like the one with Pete Hines talking about, hey, shouldn't have Xbox communicated to us that Activision Blizzard games are going to be available on all platforms in some cases, but ours aren't. What's going on there? So it's clear the pipelines are pretty poor. And a lot of people in the Xbox space are hanging their hats on Phil's wearing the Hexen shirt. They're going to bring back that. They're going to bring back Tony Hawk. Like they're going to take the Call of Duty, what does COD call it? The Call of Duty sweatshop developers who were originally making games like Singularity. Mm-hmm. And they're going to get pulled off and reactivate with their own IP. And I've tried to gently suggest to the audience that I think it's a little idealistic. And I say that as someone who was coming in pretty idealistic with Bethesda that, oh man, like you got Obsidian, you got In Exile, you got to do something with Fallout, right? And nothing. Elder Scrolls, they say in court, 5+ years away. And so you're telling me that by 2030, we're almost going to go 2 decades without a new mainline Elder Scrolls game. And the only answer was ESO. That was the only answer. Oh, sorry, in Elder Scrolls Legends. Xbox has to be more involved. And so I'm trying to tell people that while it is exciting for Game Pass, I don't know if it means an IP reactivation quite like we're all dreaming of. And that one thing Xbox conveyed pretty clearly to me is this is about mobile. This is about just leapfrogging all the way to the top of the chart with Candy Crush. That's a major get for them. And all of their, even when they were looking at Square Enix, it said in 2019, it's like their mobile division was one of the lead reasons. And I think with Sega, me and Cog have been saying for a while, Sega's definitely on Xbox's purchasing chart. We were proven correct. And I think doubly so now that they bought Rovio. The Xbox wants mobile because there are so many emails just saying the same thing over and over. Like, yeah, console gain is flat. They're trying to go to more screens with Game Pass. And they've said over and over and over, mobile is significantly growing worldwide. So, I do find some of the excitement a little bit, I would say almost misunderstood. I don't think they're wrong because there's no doubt like having your Call of Duties and whatever else Activision puts out there in Game Pass is a huge get. But I think it's a product of a generation of dryness. I think there's a little bit of anger and to some people, and I get both sides of the argument, but I think there's a little bit of anger in some of the mistreatment of Xbox in particular instances. Like they got lit up pretty bad for, I think it was Rise of the Tomb Raider exclusivity. Mm-hmm. I believe that was the game.
Yep.
And I get it. They were hopping in the middle of a series trying to find their Uncharted and
they were very cagey about it.
Yeah. Like I'm not defending them on it, but I think a lot of fans from just without that nuance look at it as, oh, but PlayStation bought like Final Fantasy VII Remake. Why is that okay? So I think a lot of Xbox fans are kind of fed up with what they view as this biased reporting, like, rah, PlayStation, oh, Xbox can't do this specific thing.
Do you hear this from people at Xbox, or is this, I'm curious, or is this just like...
this is just my interpretation.
I'm just wondering if that's, I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just wondering also if that's if you hear that ever, because I'd be very curious to know that. I have no connections at Xbox, so I don't.
Yeah, no, I have a few. I mean, they. I'll get into that in a little bit, but I that's how I read the fans right now. Is like I think they want Sony to take a punch in the mouth so bad that they'll do anything for it. That includes just getting Activision under their belt, because I think it was fine, but the fans to the flame was Jim Ryan, kind of just saying, oh, we're going to go out of business without this. But then you see the email saying, oh, we're going to be more than fine. So people are like, oh, he's full of shit. So I think it's, I hate to say it because it's maybe not productive to say, but I do think a lot of it is fanboyism on both sides. I don't think when Xbox gets Activision, I mean, Bethesda is or ZeniMax, I should say, is a big company with a lot of developers, but I think it's manageable. And they've had problems with that. And I'm telling people, I'm like, if they've just had a huge issue with Redfall, they're clearly all in on Starfield because they've known since day one, like that's probably one of the main reasons they bought the company, is whatever Bethesda Game Studios is going to make. But it's going to be even more difficult with Activision, which already has a ton of workplace issues. And now you got to try to maintain what talent is there, when I imagine a lot of them are going to leave after they get their big paycheck, after the buyout. I'm trying to warn people, like, it's not going to be, I think, this immediate win quite like we originally thought it was. Look, I was one of the first to be like, yeah, this is awesome. And I'm still pro acquisition on that, on Activision. I think there's a line you draw eventually. No doubt. COG was a little different on that. So, because like, I think Sega was where we both were kind of like, if you get them, it's like, you got to have a cutoff, because then you start becoming Embracer. But I'm going on a lot. Point being is, I think a lot of it just really does stem from, I think it really just stemmed from just the desire for Sony to take a massive L, where at all costs, really.
I that actually makes a lot of sense to me. It reduces back to the sports fandom argument, and I was trying to identify that, I think, with Jaffe actually, where we were trying to kind of get to the bottom of the fanboyishness and all of the rest, because I'm a big PlayStation fan, but I think fanboyism comes from ignoring reality, right? So I beat the shit out of Sony all the time. I just don't know how that could be fanboyish. Some people might look at me as a fanboy nonetheless, but I think I try to stay fair. But I try to remove myself like one level back and then see it like you're saying, where it's just, they just want Sony to take a loss.
It's weird because,
and I get it because that's very sports like,
yeah,
right? Like,
it's
like when Michael Vick was playing for the Eagles, right? It's like, people are like, well, we just want to win. And it's like, I hate to use that reference because I'm making Xbox fans seem like, they don't care about dogs, but yeah, it's just, that's what came to mind. So I'm saying what you're saying is the first time I've heard it make sense to me.
Good. I'm glad I could help. Yeah. I and the thing with the fanboyism for us is, it's weird because you want your hosts of respectively your Xbox and PlayStation podcast to be fans of the brand. Like, hey, we like what they're doing here. We want to be here. You want them to be knowledgeable of the brand. And I think with that does come some sort of inherent bias, no matter how much we try to strip it out. But people got to realize you can't have both ways. If you get a general games commentator to hop in and talk about Xbox, that's a good angle, but you're just not going to get the same deep dive that someone who's a fan of the brand is going to get. And so I think people got to, I think it's a kind of one-sided argument that falls apart pretty quickly when people complain about, like, you or I, like, oh, Matt's just a fanboy. It's like, I crank on Xbox all the time. There's a litany of videos out there on me just lighting them up, and they've been receptive to it. So it's like, I have no reason to change how I approach them. They've still provided access for games, still giving me opportunity. So there's never, even if there was a loss, I've had that happen before where companies have cut me off. It's like, I don't really care, but I don't know why people would worry about you in particular with your fanship of PlayStation being a barrier. Cause it's like, that's what makes the analysis worthwhile, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think so too. Jaffe, I want to hear from you. I mean, I'm curious now what your perspective is on.
Well,
take it however you'd like.
Well, there's a couple of things. First off, I don't want to let it pass that Matty brought up the term generation of dryness. I think that could go I mean, it sounds like you're talking about a female product. I love the idea of that. I've never heard those words together. Have you suffered from a generation of dryness? Well,
we got brought you.
Good news. This
you got your soundboard going.
Sponsored by Slicky Slit. It'll never be dry again, baby. Listen, so that's that. I have to do that because otherwise I'll explode. So listen, there's two things. The first thing is, I mean, your first question, Colin, honestly, you guys, I think kind of went away from that because you automatically are talking about, they call you a fanboy or this, that, the other. But your original question, I believe, if I heard it right, was what has created fanboys anyway for a brand that has been so spectacularly uneven and average?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm asking. Because I asked that, Jaffe, not to interrupt, but I asked that because I was with Nintendo as a kid all the way through into the Wii era, and they lost me for that very reason. They lost me immediately. I was like, no, I'm out. Like you,
but they gave you a reason to love them originally,
right? That's exactly right. Consistently, right. You know. So go ahead.
My guess would be that there is a generational line that you can draw and say the fans of Xbox that were coming up when the 360 like was in its heyday, like when Halo 2 was not 360, I know, but Halo 2 was like a big zeitgeisty thing. Mm-hmm. And then all the way up until, you know, Xbox 360 with Gears and Gears 2 and all that. If you were like, you know, formative, if you were like 7 to 15 in that era and that defined video games for you, then, and that's a lot of people because they were really neck and neck with Sony and they were really kind of a big player at that time. I can see where, you know, it's like I grew up watching Auburn football with my dad. Auburn football is a terrible team, but it's what I know because, and it gives me warm feelings. And so I can't defend the Auburn football program, but I can defend the fact that I have warm feelings for it because I have all this other stuff. So my guess is that's playing a part. And I think you could probably look at a generational line and say, I don't know what the math is, but if you go back and say what generation are kids who were, you know, 8 to 15 when in that console war section of time, that's probably a big part of it. The other thing I will say, though, is, you know, part of it is, and I don't think this is the biggest part of it, but, and I think it's kind of, I don't like it, but I think Xbox has done a better job with the performative horse shit of their executives. I think, you know, Sean Layden did a great job. Shu did a great job. Jim Ryan is horrible as a front man, which is nobody needs him to be a front man. You know, it's an irrelevant check mark on your resume. The man is, as much as I want the acquisition to go through, everything he's done is fucking smart and correct. And I give him props for that. But I think he's a terrible person when it comes to charismatic, you know, presentation. But Spencer's out there, Sarah Bond's out there, Matt Booty, who I think should absolutely be run out of town on a rail, is out there. I think he should keep his job and do something at Microsoft. Seems like a nice guy, seems like a talented guy. I think they need to, if the acquisition goes through, they need to fucking get Rob Ferguson out of Blizzard and bring him over and say, would you fucking do this for us? Because I don't know if you guys read the IGN article on Perfect Dark, kind of imploding and sort of what's been going on.
The initiative or whatever. Yeah,
it is. That. I mean, and you know, this was, you know, I talked about this on my shit 2 years ago when they first did the trailer, and all the fanboys were coming at me like, Jaffe, you're an idiot. That fucking trailer was awesome, and all. I'm like, dude, right? Well, lo and behold, you know, it's a fucking disaster. It's not now because Crystal's pretty much taken over, but it's just like. Anyway, it's its own thing. But the bigger point, though, is they're out there pressing the flesh. They're taking pictures, which I find really distasteful. I will say, and I don't mean to come after, you know, Defining Duke, but I know it's different between Sacred Symbols and Defining Duke in the sense that, like, I don't think you'll ever see Colin Moriarty out there in the world at a breakfast with Scott Rhodey smiling like, isn't this cool that we got to eat breakfast with Scott Rhodey? Like there's a wall there that I think allows us to be able to go, he doesn't give a shit. But I know Defining Duke gives more of a shit. You know, I've seen pictures that you guys have put up with the executives and all that stuff. And I find it it's like, on one hand, it's good marketing for you guys, right? Because it's like, you guys are like, look, guys, we're connected. And I think there's value to your personal brand of defining Duke. But at the same time, I kind of go, don't give these guys, don't present these guys as special. Because in doing that, I think it kind of adds to that lack of genuineness about the reporting that a lot of people could potentially have. You know what I'm saying? It's like but to the bigger point though, I think that's what allows Xbox maybe to get a little bit more love, is that they do that well, and they're working the room. Phil Spencer is not your friend. Sarah Bond is not your friend. I'm not saying they're not good people, and in real life they couldn't be your friend, but they're not your fucking friends when they're at a press event. I've been on that side. I was working the room too. It's all performative. It's all to get the brownie points. And I just I wish they weren't so good at it, but I wish even more the fanboys or the news people that cover them weren't so susceptible to it, because I certainly think that contributes, not as much as the generational thing I was talking about, but certainly they're better at it and it seems to work. So why not keep doing it? I mean, what do you think about that, Matty? I mean, do you agree that maybe isn't the best for your brand, or do you think it brings value when you guys are out there doing that kind of stuff?
No, I actually appreciate you said that. I love talking about this type of stuff. I think there's a fair argument to both sides, not to fence ride for a moment here, but just more so to say that I think it's fair if people look at, like, I'm trying to think, in my defense, I'm trying to think of a picture of me with an Xbox exec. I don't know if I have.
No, I'm thinking of the one recently.
With Redfall event?
No. What's his name? He's on Iron Lords. I love him.
Cog.
Yes. He did one with Sarah Bond recently. Oh, okay. But there were many. It wasn't just him. Yeah. Tons of these pictures of lots. There was Aaron Greenberg at breakfast with a bunch of Xbox journalists or whatever, influencers. But yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair to say. I think it's fair if, like, people think there's a contamination of the quality of our reporting, that, you know, if they see us with these executives and they think they're schmoozing us, that, you know, if they choose not to believe what we have to say, or think that, again, it may have been, our opinions may have been contaminated, then you know, so be it. They're totally entitled to that.
I think it more calls into question, how are you falling for it? It's not so much your opinions are contaminated, but why would you want a picture with Sarah Bond? She's an executive at a fucking company that, I mean, what's the value? What's the value of a picture with Phil Spencer? Like,
I can't speak for it because I haven't had that. So,
okay.
But if I were there, I mean, I guess I would look at it as, I'm not going to be an asshole to you. Like, if you want to take a picture, we can do that.
Oh, if Sarah Bond's like, I'd love a picture with you, MrMattyPlays. I love your shit. Sure.
Well, can I, I'm sorry, dude. I don't want to interrupt you here.
No, go ahead. What's up?
I was going to ask, like, to kind of put a fine point on it. And I know, Dag, we haven't heard from you yet, so I'm going to kick over to you in a few, but I will say that Matty and I have had the conversation behind the scenes on, like, would he embrace the sacred symbol style, right? Mm-hmm. And we kind of came to the agreement, I think, and it's Matty's show, and I've always said he can do whatever he wants, that it's probably not beneficial for them to throw off those shackles, especially for a publisher, in my experience, an Xbox or a platform holder, in my experience in media, that is incredibly accessible. Like, they'll send you and give you whatever the fuck you want. And I remember when I was doing Podcast Beyond and PS I Love You, they were up our asses with stuff because they want your attention, right? Like, and so you can't necessarily eschew that. And I totally get that. But I will say, to be fair, that when I started getting cut off, so companies just started cutting me off, like, wouldn't work with me anymore for various reasons. So you would assume it's probably like becoming like half of what I needed to work with. And at that point, to be fair, I was like, fuck it. You know, I just leaned into it. It's hard sometimes because, as I've said before, there are companies that definitely want to work with me. I'm always saying no to companies like Koei Tecmo, Square Enix, they want to work with us. There are companies like PlayStation and third parties of various kinds that don't, like Ubisoft would never work with us and all of that, which is hysterical because I'm the biggest Far Cry stan in the world probably. But I decided to say, like, I'm going to make that work for me. And it's that in and of itself is a marketing thing, I must say, like, at a meta level.
Sure.
So I get all of the arguments about like staying connected and staying unconnected, but I will say that, and I've told this to Matty and other people, that the one thing in my opinion that being disconnected, Jaffe, has done for me, and maybe you would be able to appreciate this, is it just removes all of the stress from my life. I have no embargoes. I don't have any PR emails coming at me. I don't have 7 codes in my fucking inbox and I have to decide what I want to play. It's like that life was actually quite stressful, and it's not working in a fucking coal mine, but it was just like, I got to play Final Fantasy 16 along with everyone else, and it was awesome. And I'm not anywhere close to being done with it. And so,
and all that data is out there for people who want it right when it drops, because, so whatever. But to be fair, you have to say it is a point of privilege, though. The fact that you can say that, and maybe, I don't know, and I'm not asking about Matt's own personal life or Dagan's or whatever, but the fact that you can financially say, I don't need you, is partially a marketing aspect, which is a great narrative. And it's also partially built on the bones of the fact that you can afford to tell them to fuck off. And I think that's important to also be aware of, is that sometimes, if you're trying to build something, you do choose to play the game. And I appreciate that, but I'm a purist, right? I demand my journalist or my people who share data and analysis with me, I don't want them to be friends with their subjects. I don't care about that. I want to know what they really think, and I don't want anything that's going to make me question their loyalty to me, because I'm their audience. I'm the master that they should be serving, not fucking Microsoft in hopes that they maybe get a job one day as a fucking producer or designer. That's my thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just wanted to say that I think, it is a point of privilege. And it's a point of pride that I don't need them. It's a great point of frustration that for a lot of I don't want to say a lot, but a few of these companies, that they can't really communicate with us. Right. I'm sure it's frustrating for Sony, for their low level PR people that have to listen to all of this shit and, make notes and all of that for the PR team and for the marketing team, that the biggest PlayStation podcast or the most listened to PlayStation podcast, even if they wanted to work with us, will never work with them. Like, there's just
for them, they are suffering from what I like to call a generation of dryness when it comes to Sacred Symbol. You know what they should do? Slitty clitty PlayStation low level PR.
Dave, let's hear from you, my friend. I'm curious how you take this question and what you what do you think of Xbox and its current situation and how it's gotten here? And as a player of games for a long period of time, although dipping in and out and much more retro focused in a lot of ways, I'm curious, the original Xbox is a retro machine now, but I'm just curious if there's been any draw for you, because as far as I can tell, knowing you as I do, that there's been virtually no interest from you in Xbox in any way, shape, or form since it was launched. And I'm pretty sure that when we played Halo, and that was your first time playing it, I love Halo. The first 2 Halos I think are awesome. When you played it, I'm pretty sure that was your first Xbox published game ever.
That was.
So you have a real outsider's perspective, and I'm really curious to hear what you think.
And I played Halo CE on Steam.
Right.
I've never played or owned an Xbox console. So that is an interesting perspective. But you guys have talked about the nuts and bolts at length. So I'll give you my very specific perspective on this whole thing, which has been my perspective since the beginning, when we first found out that Microsoft was looking to acquire Activision Blizzard, King. Thanks for shouting out King, Matty. No one, I think it's our specific bubble, but nobody's talking about King, and it is a huge part of this whole conversation. But my specific perspective on this, and Kyle, I think you mentioned this briefly in your email to us when you announced the topic this week, is my overarching philosophy with this sort of thing is to compete with creativity. And let me explain. Now, I understand Microsoft's perspective for this acquisition. You want to acquire these companies, and you want to acquire these very meaningful, very lucrative franchises. I get it, right? Overwatch, Call of Duty, Hawk, WoW, right? Crash, it gets into weird territory, but I understand. I totally understand it. But my perspective is, I've been looking at this whole thing through Sony's lens, and I just wish that, and this is probably not realistic, and this is probably the artist and the creative person in me coming out, but I wish Sony would just stand down, shut the hell up. This goes for the fan base too, by the way. adopt this policy of not apathy, but passivity. In other words, stay out of it, right? And I think, that would be super classy to kind of adopt that very public approach. And B, rise to the occasion. In other words, this whole thing, maybe this pulls Microsoft into, to a few lengths, or maybe it doesn't. But it's going to bridge the gap a little bit between the consoles and the console war and where people's, dollar is going and all that kind of thing. But both of these companies have the resources and they have the creative might at their disposal to do it with creativity, make something new, create something, hit the drawing board. So, and let me be very specific about this. For instance, Sony's concerned about Call of Duty. I get it. But there is this thing, if I'm not mistaken, which has been on the board. I don't think Sony obviously hasn't bit yet because they haven't had to, but there's this thing that Spencer has been saying, like, we'll give you a 10-year window with Call of Duty, right? Okay. This thing goes through. Beautiful. Jim Ryan's happy because now he has 10 years. I would argue now hit the drawing board, make a game. You want to compete with Call of Duty on that Call of Duty level, make a game. You have 10 years. And I argue you could do it and do it really well in 5. So, and let me also say it from an artist or creator's perspective at both of these companies and all of these companies that Microsoft might be acquiring. There are creative people chomping at the bit. Put me in, coach, to make something new and make something great and compete on that level. That's my very specific perspective. I would think the same thing if it was just a media company. I think about Disney through this whole thing too, which is my second point, this double standard, right? Disney has been this Moby Dick swimming the seas of media for the better part of 2 decades now. When they acquired Henson Productions, people didn't know it for years, unless you walked into a Disney store and saw the Muppet and Miss Piggy merch on the shelves. The public really didn't know that Disney owned Henson, and it started, and then it snowballed, right? Henson, Marvel, Star Wars, Nat Geo. They got this weird incestuous relationship with Pixar.
Was the first one, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they owned Pixar.
Yeah, and that was the mid-90s, Jaffe. So this has been snowballing for a long time, the better part of 30 years, and nobody seems to, and don't forget the Fox thing, right? Which is the most recent. So, and nobody kind of bats an eyelash at that. And Disney just keeps going. So that's the other thing too, where it's like, let this thing happen. If it's between the FTC and Microsoft, and a lot of this stuff I think is kind of above my pay grade. Like, I don't get a lot of that sort of infighting. But for from Sony's perspective, it would be cool to just kind of let it play out. I just think, I know it's rare and I don't understand the corporate perspective. And I obviously, the bottom line is that's the goal. But, it would be nice to see Sony adopt this policy of, okay, let's do this. You know what I mean? Let's create something new. And then that sort of mindset is what's going to benefit the fans, because we're going to get old stuff rehashed and redone and improved, and we're going to get new stuff. And everybody's happy. The other thing too, I don't know if a lot of people are talking about, I'm sure it comes up on your guys' shows, is this console war thing is good for business on both sides. I think back, because I'm old, the whole Sega Nintendo thing, right? Sega does what Nintendo don't. But this whole thing, obviously there's this rivalry between the companies, between the fan bases. But I think that sort of console war mindset of putting yourself on one side or the other, that's good for business for everybody. And I want people to be aware of that. Like, that's a beneficial thing for both companies, And I just think, for Sony, they seem to be so far ahead of the game anyway. It's like, let them pull up. Maybe this is good. Maybe this getting on an even playing field is good for both, for both sides, for both companies, and everybody buying the games, all the gamers. I think it would benefit everybody ultimately.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I think that there's a lot of agreement. Like I read a guy named Matt Stoller. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. He does a really great Substack. He's an economic analyst, and he's like really into antitrust situations. He's actually going to be on Sacred Symbols in a couple of weeks. And we're going to talk about this from his perspective. He's very pro FTC in this argument. But in his writings, if you read them, he refers to Sony as a pig. And in other words, saying like Sony is not the good guy here. They're really more of a neutral entity, but they actually act in really uncompetitive ways too. They just do it in smaller ways that pay off because they're willing to take bigger or smaller financial risks and plant them around. And we all know that, Sony will set a bunch of different second and third party seeds and see what sprouts. And there is a certain competitive nature to that as well, because they give things time to breathe and they give studios space to work and all of that. I think my one concern, and I've gotten great answers from all of you guys, and I'm curious to see what you guys think of this as we exit. I know we're going long. Is, am I off base to be concerned about these two things? And this is, I guess, these are my two concerns with this. And these are the only things that matter to me. Because as I've said, I'm like Neo in the Matrix with this shit right now, in the sense that Microsoft has gone after two publishers that really are irrelevant to me, right? In Bethesda, which I love, Doom and Wolfenstein. It's like whatever. I imagine those games might still come to PlayStation, actually. The next ones, they're kind of more cagey about what's going to happen with more legacy content. I mean, maybe we're seeing more that might not be the case based on the FTC case, but and Activision, I don't give a flying fuck about Activision. So for me personally as a gamer, I have no personal stake in this. It's not like I risk losing anything. I don't care. But there are two things that make me concerned about Microsoft and why I'm wary of the brand. Is the first thing is that I don't believe, and I know people are rolling their eyes, but I think Game Pass is bad. The way the specific nature of Game Pass, I think, is untenable. And the only reason that they can make it work, obviously, is because they can use brute force. And
can I ask you, those are two different things, though. Whether it's bad or untenable, is it bad because it's untenable?
Well, no. So I'm gonna get deeper into this, and I think this will answer your question. Okay. I'm worried about the money, because I don't believe, and by the way, I think this is an interesting point, that we now have 3 of the 4 CEOs of the biggest console publishers in the world on the record, 2 under oath, saying that they don't think Game Pass works. And I think that that's a really interesting thing, including the CEO of the person selling the company, in which all of their games will be subsumed by it. He says, we would never put our games on Game Pass. And then people point to PlayStation Plus getting Call of Duty Cold War. And I'm like, you guys know that's not what he's talking about. That's 3 Call of Duties ago. We're talking about new games. And he's simply saying, I don't know how you make this work. And I thought Bobby Kotick's testimony was fascinating, because he's like, here in LA, we're watching as it fails at all of the video, movie, and TV houses around us, that their whole thing is unsustainable. And our shit makes more money and costs more money to make. So if it's not working for them, it's going to be a big deal on our side. And I think they see that, and they're trying to hold the line. Strauss Zelnick, before that, has been Take-Two's CEO, has been the most vociferous, saying like, that just doesn't make sense, like, for us. And I think, and obviously, Jim Ryan now feels that way. And I thought Jim Ryan was interesting. I thought it was interesting that he said under oath as well that it was his understanding that they were losing a lot of money on it. Now, I think he wouldn't have the literal knowledge, but the figurative knowledge of how that could be. And so I look at it and I worry about, so this gets back to your point, Jaffe. I worry about the company that seems to have the least wits about them in this space having the most revenue to be able to reshape the economics. It's not like Nintendo reshaping the economics, right? If Nintendo was doing something like this, it would actually be a little different, because it's like, well, they're Nintendo. They have like a decades-long history of quality and domination, right? And so you would trust that they would do things better. And even Sony, to a much lesser extent, I think, than Nintendo. You'd be like, okay, I guess, but they don't want to go down that road. And of course, there's an economic reason to it. But I also believe that in them holding that line in the mid and long term, it's going to protect the quality and the production levels of video games. And so my only concern, if this makes any sense from my perspective about this whole deal, is that we're letting the least capable, most moneyed entity subsume all of this content to a degree that I think is actually quite dangerous, and reset the economics in ways that only benefit it and not the other companies that do things a different way. And I think it's clear, no matter how good streaming is from a consumer point of view, which is why I think the FTC has a losing case with this, because from a consumer's point of view, Game Pass is amazing. But I'm not talking about it from that perspective. I'm talking about it from more of a creative perspective about big budgets, big, enterprises, big ambitions, and the way that they can be stymied and ruined because we want to funnel everything into a $19 and 99 cents subscription model or whatever the case might be. And so that is my concern. And I think that that's a fairly eloquent concern. And I'm surprised. I'm sorry.
I don't agree with it.
No, yeah, please go ahead. But I think
eloquently expressed.
Yeah, that's my point. I don't think you don't have to agree with the dynamics, but I think I'm making my case well enough that that is a concern to me.
I think the mistake you're making, though, is you're associating budget with ambition and budget with quality and budget with what the audience cares about. We saw it. We've seen Sean Layden say it. We saw, I think, Phil Spencer say it under oath, where he said, the growth is in mobile. The core console group fans, we don't ever really build that, right? We build it with mobile. We can't build it at core. So the number of people who actually care about bleeding edge graphics and all that, of course they're out there. Of course they're a huge audience. They should be served. They should be taken care of, and they're very lucrative. But if you are looking at sort of the big media landscape where people are talking mobile phone games and Roblox and Fortnite and rolling your own games with like Fortnite Creative 2.0 or the new AI stuff with Roblox, that's what the kids are coming up with today. And the idea of Activision the idea of Microsoft being the right Pied Piper, I would agree with, because they haven't really earned the faith that they've got a vision. But at the same time, though, I think there is something about your eloquently stated argument that is incorrect when it comes to it's built on the bones of assuming that the way things have been forever in terms of what the core gamer loves is the de facto simply understood definition of what gamers are going to want in the future and want now. Because if you look at mobile, they don't give a fuck. All the money being made in these mobile games, and it's nothing that the core gamer appreciates. And that's not to say that the core gamer doesn't deserve to be served. But when you're talking about money at this level and acquisitions at this level, they're not going after the guy who wants to go to a midnight launch for Gears of War 3. That's not what this is about. And so I don't think that the subject of the people you're talking about necessarily fit into the argument that you're making. I think they're aiming for a bigger audience, but that's just my take.
No, that's an interesting take. I mean, all this is valid to me. I don't know what the right answer is. I simply want to express it because it's not something I'm holding from a partisan point of view. It's something I really feel like I look
because
at something
you
like
love this stuff.
I
right?
do, right?
Right. And it's a personal passion thing that you feel, right? But I mean, economically, if you were on the board at Microsoft, you would probably say, hey, this is good for us, right?
Oh, I do think it's good for them in the short term. I don't think anyone could deny that. It's funny though, because we brought up, Disney consuming everything around it. And I'm like, I don't think that's worked out very well for those products. I'm sorry. Like they've made a lot of money. Yes. But I think that they've kind of really wrung the shit out of Star Wars. I think they kind of wrung the shit out of Marvel. I think that it's kind of a shame from a creative standpoint. And I don't give a shit about them as companies,
No.
Well, go ahead. Do you have something you want to say, Jaffe?
I think you can look at it today and agree with that. Like, okay, let's get to, first off, let's not forget that there was this really weird phase where Bob Iger left. And you had this Chippewa guy, whatever the fuck his name was, who couldn't fucking tie his own shoes, who was running Disney and making a bunch of bad decisions. And now Bob Iger came back.
That's right.
Took over.
Yeah.
Bob Iger was good with talent. He was integral to the Jobs and the Pixar deal, and he was very visionary. Remains very visionary, executive, creative guy. But everybody kind of looks at it now. But before, when Avengers Endgame came out, and it was the cap, where I think maybe Iger would have said, okay, let's take a break. Let's settle. That was cold. There will be people remembering being in the theater for Endgame the way my generation remember being in the theater for Jedi. I mean, it was a decade of building this soap opera to this grand conclusion. They would have never done that without Disney's money. Okay. People looking back and say Star Wars was ruined. Okay. I would agree that the last 3 movies are pretty forgettable, but you can't, unless you were a kid and you're on nostalgia juice, you can't defend the prequels. Star Wars hadn't been good since really 1981. At least with Disney, you got The Mandalorian, you got Andor, right? You've at least got stuff coming that's better than anything that we've seen. I don't know. I think Disney doesn't get a fair shake. The other thing I'll say is that ultimately it's the people, right? So all of these people, if you get your company acquired, it's called a key man contract, right? So if somebody came in and bought Last Stand Media, I'm sure Colin would have to sign a key man contract, which is like, we're buying the company, but you're part of why the company works. If you want this acquisition to go through, you've got to be on for 5 years, right? Those people are not dead because of the acquisition. All these people eventually either they stay at the company because they believe in the change, or they make their money, get out and start a new company. We see it all the time in video games. It's the dance that you do. You build a company, you sell the company, you get rich, you go off, start another company, do it again. That's kind of, look at the guys who did Blizzard, right? They did Silicon Synapse Blizzard. They sold it. Their contracts expired. They left. Now they've all got new companies, which I'm sure in 10 years, if they're successful, they'll sell those.
Right.
So the people, the artists, they're not dead. They kind of go where they can express themselves. And so I don't know. I worry about that narrative that it's like, Disney, I think, has brought a lot to those things that they've picked up. I mean, Marvel was almost in bankruptcy before Iron Man came out. And that wasn't Disney, of course, I understand. But they've allowed them to do things. I mean, man, maybe it's a generational thing again. I was a kid where the best Spider-Man I got was on the Electric Company. Right? It was a guy in a fucking Party City suit running around going, how do you spell fire hydrant? If you can't figure that out, the bad guy gets away. And now I've got a fucking She-Hulk fucking series. Now, whether you like She-Hulk or hate She-Hulk, that would have never happened without Disney. Right. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm not all in on this idea that the Disney acquisition was bad. And I'm not all in on this idea that acquisition kills creativity, because creativity drives a lot of the stuff until it becomes brand. Then brand drives a lot of the stuff, drives everything. And those people aren't going to stop creating. It's like Dagan said, it's like, yeah, they'll build a better mousetrap. They probably won't build it at Sony, because when you're talking about $200 million, $220 million budgets, you have too many cooks that are going to let you build a better mousetrap. But you'll probably build it like PUBG did. Remember, PUBG comes along first from Arma, then PUBG. It was nothing, but it became this massive thing. Same thing with like Minecraft. That's where the real juice is. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point.
Well, I know we're going long on this topic. I just wanted to say one other thing. I said that there were 2 reasons, right, that I was skeptical about this. And the other is an honest one, and that this is just market capitalism. But this is the reality. This is me being honest with you about one of the things that I'm scared about, which is this forces Sony to change. If Sony after this, if Sony was paying any attention to what was going on in that courtroom and saw those documents of 120 potential acquisition targets that Xbox was looking at, 120. No rhyme or reason to we went through this on Sacred Symbols, like literally no rhyme or reason to the studios on this list. Like they were just totally like, what can we pay attention to? Like, what could we potentially want? This is a vacuum, this company. And people would claim, and I've said before, like Sony would probably have a list just as long. And I'm like, no way, man. That's not true, simply because there's no evidence that they ever functioned like that. So why would they have a list like that? But now, if this deal goes through, and I think by the time this goes live, we'll find out that it's going to go through.
I think so too.
Then
I don't feel confident saying that. So
we'll see. I mean, we'll see.
I kept my opinions off of Duke on that too. I was like, I don't know. I'm just going to wait. I'm going to cover my own ass after Redfall, where I said 80 Metacritic, maybe. Nope. Not doing it again.
It just I use Hogue Law when it's like playing craps with a friend who knows how to play it. It's like whatever you tell me to put the chips on. Yeah. He says probably going to go through. It's going through. That's what I do. I just listen to him.
That's why I was saying earlier about like it's it's hard to just know what's actually like what is actually real without the expertise and your ability to kind of dissect it yourself. So you have to go through these intermediaries. Yeah. But my whole point is that if this goes through, Sony would be suicidal not to start consolidating. And they're going to. I mean, I would imagine that companies like Square Enix, Capcom, I imagine these companies, and I've said in the past that their salvation would probably be through some sort of Japanese consortium of companies. Yes. To keep the company very Japanese and double down on that. You have enough Western. You have
100%.
All their teams are in the West. So a lot of the big, the games that they can possibly get out of a Capcom, which is in a complete renaissance right now, anti-Crapcom, and all of the rest. I don't want that to happen because Sony doesn't win there. Like people ask
yourself fundamentally what you are worried about.
Well, let me answer. So Sony is already expanding, I think, beyond its bounds with some of the teams that it's been acquiring lately. And I don't think there are very few logical acquisitions left, right? Like Moon Studio would be a logical acquisition maybe, or whatever, like the guys that are working on that Project Bates. You would have thought that Deviation maybe, but obviously Deviation has flamed out. So any acquisition beyond that is an acquisition the likes of which they've really never made. And I don't believe that they became PlayStation through acquisitions like that. I believe that they became PlayStation by working with studios, setting those seeds, seeing which ones sprout and work over time, and then subsuming them when they think it makes sense. And as I said on Sacred Symbols, I think what they used to do is like date and court and all of that, very, very Victorian. And now it's like one night stands, like Haven, right? Or Fire Sprite. It's like, we have no time to think about this. We slept together. We have our money together. All right, we're just going to take you and we're going to figure it out later. That was never the way Sony operated. Now they're going to accelerate even further. And by the way, the 2 games that came out of that we know about so far are 2 of some of the worst received games, and Fair Games and Concord. So my honest to God creative fear as a PlayStation fan is that they have to react to this in ways that will not benefit them, because they are not managers of a fleet of studios. They are managers of a tight family. They shut their studios down when maybe they even shouldn't, right? Like Zipper getting shut down or Evolution. Like they really didn't fail that badly. Like they don't have patience for that. Now in this new world, I don't think PlayStation can compete. And that's the breaks, but that sucks. Like
I think you're underselling PlayStation a little bit.
Yeah, personally. A little bit.
I also think you're making this assumption that they have to stay the same. It's like you're putting them in this box that says they have to be competing with Xbox, right? But in essence, if you look at the essence of what you love about PlayStation, and if you're PlayStation, maybe the correct move is to go, we're not heavyweight anymore. Our products are heavyweight. What do we do well? We make brilliant narrative-based cinematic action adventure games. They do other, MLB The Show is great and Gran Turismo, but on the whole, that's what people know them for and love about them, right? I would say most people who are gamers today, that's what they associate with Sony, those kinds of games. The answer isn't necessarily, okay, well, how do we keep doing that and kill Xbox? The answer is, okay, the media landscape has changed drastically. Why fight that war? Why not double down on what we do well, whether we go third party, maybe they should go third party. Yeah. Maybe they should. Why not? If what you love is the software, if what you really love about them is their creative decision-making and their creative software and how they manage these studios, what does it matter what box they're on?
Yeah, because I like more than that about PlayStation. That's not the only thing I like about PlayStation.
Okay, so what else do you love?
Well, I just love the ecosystem. I love my trophy count. I love my PSN friends list. I love all the things that Phil Spencer was lamenting, that because they lost that generation specifically, that they don't have the advantages there that keep people still. So that's why I play with inertia.
You're like the kind of guy that's upset about digital records and I miss the record store. I respect that.
Oh yeah, no, I don't give a shit about that.
No, I know, yeah. But it's a very, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but it's a very singular, selfish thing, right?
But that's the whole. That's my whole point, Jaffe, is that this particular second argument about. So I made my Game Pass argument. The second argument isn't related to anything but me. That's the whole point. Is that
I see?
Yeah, is that like I know that this is against market economics. I know that Sony is going to have to respond. I understand. That's why I lament it, because we're gonna. I am positive they have a pull or break glass in case of emergency thing with this deal where they're going to go one of two ways at Sony. And I'm sure that
which way?
Well, I think that like if this deal goes through, which I think it will, I think they break the glass and they say like, these are the companies we have to go after, and like if this is the new world of consolidation, then A, B, C, D, and E, go talk to them and see what's going on with their financials and if they're interested. And that's going to be the reality. And I just, people always ask me like, who do you think Sony should buy? And I'm like, no one. I don't want them to buy anyone. I don't want them to become this fucking conglomerate. I want creative games and a great ecosystem, but unfortunately they have to play on these terms. So I just believe we have to get used to a Square Enix or a Capcom, a CD Projekt, IO Interactive. Some of these companies are definitely going to get purchased by PlayStation, I would imagine.
If nothing changed in the games, would you be okay if they went third party?
Yes, but with one caveat, which is that I'm a big trophy guy.
What if that went with it? Why can't they?
If that went with it, then I think that would be totally fine. But I've always said this in the past that if I were at Microsoft, one of the things that I think would be really cool, and I don't know how people feel about this, but because this would get me on Xbox more probably just as an achievement person. I have my achievements, but is like I would make a module, right, that said, if you're a PlayStation player, you put your PSN ID in this module on Xbox.com. And it scrapes, you have some sort of confirmation with a phone number or whatever. It scrapes your PSN profile of all of your trophies. Any equivalent achievements will just give them to you right away on the Xbox, right? And that way you just come in with at least everything you could have gotten. And then it's like, oh, you'll go after your first and your second party games and all of the rest. That would be a way for it to ameliorate it for me completely. I really love, Dagan and I always talk about how we used to have our lists of games that we beat. And sometimes like literally handwritten lists of games that we beat. Right. The date and all of that. And sometimes we'd lie on the list, right? And sometimes it wouldn't be true. What I love about trophies is not earning them necessarily, but having this record of like everything that actually happened. It reminds me of things that I've played. I always scroll through them and see like, oh yeah, this game and this game and this game. So, but anyway, I'm going on. I'm sorry. This was probably a bad topic for the show.
Can I just inform you guys? I want to, you guys, you three are much more informed than me on this front. But let me ask you a question. Let me tell you this, Kyle, first, just a statement. I suspect, and you know a lot more than me about Sony and the ecosystem, but I suspect they're going to be okay by largely sticking to their guns, maybe a few acquisitions. They have to maybe this is about celebrating each console platform on what they're good at. And, that's where, you can make a decision on who you like. Maybe you like both, maybe you like one or the other. But let me ask you guys this. As kind of people that are more informed than me, won't this whole thing be very telling? Because Jaffe's right, I think, right? The hardcore console gamers in this conversation are relatively small potatoes. Let's face it. It's about the mobile games. It's about King. It's about Candy Crush, right? A large chunk of this. To me, it's the family reunion dynamic, I call it, right? You go to a party, giant backyard party with 50 family members. There's 3 people playing games on consoles, and your 47, 70-year-old aunts are all playing Candy Crush. Okay? Case in point. But let's say this giant blockbuster acquisition goes through, this big deal happens. It will be very telling to see how Microsoft moves forward in their relationship with hardcore console gaming. In other words, will they stay true to it? And how true will they stay to it once that return is evident? Once they start that infusion of cash that they're putting in starts to be returned to them, and they get this cash infusion by getting these franchises and everything, right? And where they're putting the money back into the company. This will be very telling for Xbox fans, not only for Sony's reaction and Sony's fans accordingly, but for Xbox proper. It reminds me this example is on a much smaller scale, but let's look at Konami as old school gamers, right? They have all but forgotten about their console game legacy and just moved on to other areas, right? So it'll be very telling. This is I'm sure Xbox fans are nervous, but the proof's going to be in the pudding however many years down the road or months down the road after this acquisition takes place, if it happens, right? How they react and how they change accordingly. And if they could put their money where their mouth is when it comes to console gaming, which is, again, our sphere. That's what we're paying attention to. We're outside of, we're not really dealing with the mobile game, and we're not really the mobile games. We're not really paying attention to that whole side of things. But I think that's a really interesting part of the conversation. And I'm almost watching it with like my bucket of popcorn, like I'm watching a movie. I want to see how this plays out because of big repercussions like that.
Well, ask yourself what happens if one of these Sony service games hits. What if they're able to make a game for $120 million that becomes the next PUBG or becomes the next Fortnite or whatever? They're gonna change too, because they're gonna be like, holy shit, look at this fucking money that comes from this investment. Why are we spending at that point $300 million on a fucking cinematic game that has a shelf life of, X number of maybe a year, when we could be fucking rolling the dice on these fucking service games? I don't want that to happen. I'm just saying that I wonder, would that be a similar psychological shift at Sony where they're like, well, we could try 3 more of these service games or make another giant God of War. Which do we spend the money on? I don't know what I would do if I was rolling in the dough with a Fortnite of my own.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, I think that I would. And I think that's what Sony intends on doing, is doubling down, like, I think, on what they do and then trying to do all these other things. And that from a selfish point of view upsets me, and it's going to get worse now. And I think, and now they're going to be tested in ways that they're never been tested before. And some people would say like, well, them's the breaks. And I'm like, I totally agree.
That's how you make the diamonds, boy.
That's exactly right. It's like, I totally agree. Them's the breaks. Doesn't mean I can't lament it. Those are two different things, So
maybe the difference though is, and maybe this goes back to your original point about fanboys, is that you are able to acknowledge, and that's what's wonderful. I don't mean to blow sunshine up your butthole, but that's what's wonderful about having these conversations with y'all, is that there's an acknowledgement of when it's personal and it's emotional, and that can live in a different, compartmentalized place in your brain than the logical. That's what differentiates, I think, you from a fan and a fanboy. A fanboy will go to war without checking in and going, oh, this is an emotional response and it's valid and you have every right to have it, but you don't get to bring that to the table of logic and expect to be taken seriously.
No,
you should expect to be mocked.
Absolutely right. And I appreciate that. And I think that's, and Matty, I want to hear from you before we move on, if you have anything left to say, is that it's an important point to say, like, the most naturalistic thing Microsoft can do in some way, especially with their failures to spool up their studios, like we were talking about the Initiative, and they're like, they need to change the game. That's what Game Pass is. That's what doubling down on Xbox Live was. That's what the Activision purchase is. That's what the Bethesda purchase is, or was. They need to change the dynamics of the battlefield if they want to win. That is a naturalistic, capitalistic thing to do. I would be totally lying in your face if I said that it didn't make sense. I just think it makes sense in the short term only. And I think, I ask people to just be afraid, to be careful what you ask for with some of these subscription services, because of how badly they've really fucked some things up in sister industries. And I don't know. That's Matty, I'm curious if you have anything to say on the close, because I haven't heard from you.
Yeah. Just concluding thoughts. I think I'll just bounce around a lot. I'm just going to ping pong I was just taking notes while you guys were talking.
No, please go ahead.
Pardon me if I'm just all over the place for a moment here. On big publishers not loving Game Pass and your fear that, Kaga and I talked about this on DD, so I'll try to keep it brief. Like, we're of the mindset that there are almost levels to certain publishers. Like, a Call of Duty will never stand to gain from Game Pass ever. There's no sum of money that, I shouldn't say that, Microsoft has enough money, but the amount it would cost would not be worthwhile with how well Call of Duty continues to sell. And I think the same would Take-Two. You have Grand Theft Auto, NBA, 2K, these series sell extremely, extraordinarily well. You talked about shelf lives, like they will continue to sell. GTA 5 was still the top 5 charts. Like, they're pretty unique examples. And then I think there are ones that do benefit beyond the indie, like more in the AA space, more in the, I think Ubisoft can benefit in some way. So I think it's one of those things where it's still a young service in the scheme of things. And I think there's a lot we need to see shake out. But I am of the mindset there's levels to certain publishers, and that there are naturally going to be some that are too big for Game Pass. And I almost don't want to see a Game Pass becoming so big that you need to filter these huge games into it to drive sales. Because I think that brings the change that you seem to fear most, where we're kind of having that race to the bottom.
Can I ask you a question on this real quick before you move on? Because I really want to know your opinion on this, because it's totally related to this, which is, because you're saying there's different levels of publishers, and I agree. But isn't it fair to say that the publishers with the best games and the most confident in long-term returns are the ones that are not interested in participating in the subscription service? And a game like Lies of P, which is no offense to it, it's like those guys are thrilled to take their money up front. They want to just get to the next game.
That game's awesome.
But the company's like, so I've said that about Lilymo, right? Like my own studio. We have a game on Xbox Gold, Xbox Live Gold, or Xbox Live Gold. But if they came to us and wanted to be on Game Pass, we would totally be down with that. It gives us the security to just be like, fuck it. We don't care about anything else other than the survival of our next game. But I am interested in the reaction of people that don't have to worry about hedging their bets because they get to take the long view. Right. Like that's what's interesting to me. So I don't take people taking the money in the moment very seriously because they should. I mean, this again goes to the capitalism. Like you'd be fucking stupid not to take Microsoft's money. But the people that don't have to and have the luxury of being concerned about the longer view don't want to participate. And that should tell you something. And I think that's interesting to me. What do you think of that?
Interestingly, well, go ahead, Matty.
No, go ahead. Go for it. You're
I was just going to say, interestingly, then what Sony is doing is probably healthier in the long term if you don't want to disrupt the way games are today, which is with PS Plus. And I just wish they would do a little more. But PS Plus, I mean, look, you'd be a fool to argue that if you are one of those big games, it does, why would you not take as many bites at the financial apple as you can?
Certainly.
Get? So eventually, 18 months, 12 months, whatever becomes the standard, bringing the big games to PS Plus or Game Pass, yeah, I think that's awesome. And people who don't want to spend the money can know, I'm probably not going to see Indiana Jones. It'll be on Disney Plus in 2 months. I'll wait. That's fine. But I wish they would do more of the original AA and indie games that are day one on PS Plus, because I think that is where you really do find the next hits, the next cool mechanics. That's where you are ultimately going to find the people who can afford to take really wild swings because they're not betting the farm. Even if I would love Sony to take one fucking game that's $200 million and just take $10 million and just make a bunch of day one PS Plus games that are interesting and commercial and fun. And then, then I think so, because that's what Sony's mostly doing. But their AA and single A day ones are so anemic compared to Game Pass. All they really would need to do is turn that knob up 20%. And I think they would actually be a better value for everybody involved at a publisher, creator, gamer level than Game Pass.
I love the legacy subscription model. Like I think I think it works. I think it's great because it is.
It's got to come with originals though. That's the thing though. You can't just do HBO like back when we were kids, where the only thing on HBO was the movies that were already in the theaters a year ago. You got to have that, but you need the originals, man. That's what Game Pass does that I think Sony should do more of, because it doesn't cost them that much money.
No, it doesn't. And they have their occasional ones, I guess, like Stray and all these others, but.
Right, every now and then.
But yeah, but they don't care as much as they used to. If you could marry the late PS3, early PS4 era indie initiatives like PS Loves Indies, remember that?
Give Shuhei Yoshida $100 million, pull him out of third party, put him back in first party, and say, hey, go give us a bunch of day one PS Plus games that you either find and acquire or you put into production, and we're fucking owning the world. That would be the shit.
Habroxia Zero, $7.5 million. Let's do it right now, Shuhei.
Okay, but change the fucking name. I don't think that you guys in the Sacred Symbols live kept it in the edit. Speaking of the edit.
Oh no, we did. I think it was in the edit. The Habroxia insult. Yeah.
I literally called Home Depot and asked them if they had Hybroxia because I needed to unplug my toilet. Because what the fuck kind of name is Hybroxia?
I'm sorry, Barry. I didn't name it.
It's a terrible name.
Oh my God.
It's a spaceship fucking game, right?
Yeah, it's an arcade shooter.
Yeah.
Tell me how you really feel.
I'm telling you, because it's great, but why would you call I'm asking genuinely, why did you call it Habroxia?
I genuinely didn't, because I didn't own that was before me.
Why didn't you convince them to change the name before the one that, isn't it a terrible name, Colin? Let's be fair.
No, I don't think it's a terrible name personally. No, I don't.
Hybroxia.
You're saying it's Habroxia.
You're making it sound like an Oreo cookie.
Okay, well now it sounds like something in Yiddish. Hybroxia. What Dagan, tell your brother the fucking truth. It's a good game. It's a good game, but it's a terrible name.
I didn't know you felt this way. I think it harkens back to the NES days. Those
Of what?
Like Xevious or something like that?
Naming games where it was like you could never tell what it was if you just knew the title.
or whatever the fuck that game was called.
Xanadu is a great example.
Fair enough. The only thing you guys should have then is an old hillbilly on the porch playing a banjo for the box for it. You'll be set to go. If you get that cut, you're an old fuck like me.
I get that.
Maddie,
what game was that?
Oops, sorry.
That was 16-bit.
Phalanx.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the SNES game.
Yeah.
Like the early SNES game. Maddie, I want to go back to you. I know you have more notes. Sorry, we didn't mean to
Thank you. Yeah, I'll make it quick.
No, there's no reason to be quick because if we're going too long, we'll cut Dagan's topic off and he'll do 2 next week. So just go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure because I was going to offer my topic.
I want us to be natural with the conversation.
I just hope we're okay. I might have to get food in the middle of this.
Yeah, go ahead. Just do whatever you got to do.
As soon as this is over, I got to go open the door and get my food that's been sitting
Look
there.
at that. We're all going to eat during this show. It's going to be great. It's like we're having dinner together.
It's fun.
I think the initiative was quietly a very massive lesson to Xbox. While you guys were talking, it kind of struck in my head with the story that we read on Defining Duke. I think Cog had mentioned this as well, that when you look at, let's call it as it is, it's a massive failure as it stands. We'll see what Perfect Dark ends up being, but in the terms of a startup company, half the original talent leaving, losing certain affinity, bringing in now Crystal Dynamics, it's reported to be just their game at this point and less of the initiative. I don't even know if the studio identity is there. It just seems like a failed literal initiative. And I think to them, they looked at that and said, we don't want to fucking do that again. And so I think that's what's led them down this path of buying developers beyond Game Pass. They're probably seeing more success out of the Compulsions, the Ninja Theories, and Obsidians who have actually produced games than the initiative, which they invested in from the startup. They got literal all-star talent. And
they went to Santa Monica specifically to poach from Sony. That was the exact reason they went there. And I knew people that left those studios to go there. So
it completely has fallen apart. Again, I'm rooting for them. I don't want to see Perfect Dark come out and suck, but I think it was quietly a huge lesson to them that really cascaded into let's go get Bethesda when they heard they were about to lose more Bethesda games beyond Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo. I really do think it was just a number of things leading into that has pushed them to be this type of brute force sort of company. And with that, I say, because I know your original question was like, should we trust a company that's, you said like their argument hedged on like how bad they are at it. And I think that we might be specifically Colin in his argument, I think you might be underselling Xbox a little bit. Because I think of it a lot like Mets baseball for a lot of Xbox fans where, for like Mets fans, we got the 2015 season, right? And it was this season of dreams, like kind of ragtag group, guys rising up. And it was like, oh, this is what we're capable of. This is what it's like when the Mets are good. And since then, like we've had some competitive teams. And like this year, they're bankrolling and they have the highest salary cap in baseball. And they're awful. And I think of Xbox a little bit like that, where we've seen, I think, more sustained compared to the Mets, glimpses of promise. Like, I think the OG Xbox generation was really fun, especially in retrospect. Like, you look at, of course, the Halo Combat Evolved being a magnificent game, but some of the weirder exclusives like Blink's, Death Row.
Come on.
Yeah, just really.
That's nostalgia, baby.
I know.
Come on, Blinks.
Yeah.
Blink, come on now.
That's why I said retrospect. I'm not.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. I'm just saying, I think a lot of Xbox fans found promise in that. They're like, oh, these are cool. The spirit of Sega is what they call it. And then as Jaffe said, like the 360 generation was the zeitgeist dominant force that they were with the Gears and Halo. And so people see like, oh, this is what you can be. And then we all know what happened to Xbox One. You get these scarce, interesting games like a Sunset Overdrive to me is like the standout one, which funny enough is now from...
Or Titanfall, right?
Titanfall was awesome. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. And so you get these glimpses and people I think that's what drives them, just to get back to the original core of the conversation. Like, I think that's what drives a lot of Xbox fans. And I think that's almost what's driving Xbox a bit is like, we know we can do this, but they need I think what they're worried about is getting IP now, because that's what happened when PlayStation thoroughly outclassed them for a whole generation. They had an IP problem. Now it's going to be a talent thing. I think like who's got the best talent in the industry, because Xbox is certainly going to have the IP. We know PlayStation's built the IP. They have a massive library too. So it's going to be about who's skilled enough to make the most use of what they have there.
Can I ask you something about Xbox? Because you have the skinny on those guys more than any of us.
Sure.
Why do you think there hasn't been a meaningful management shift when it comes to their product development?
Yeah.
Because I know it's a drum I beat all the time, but it's because I don't understand it. It's like any other company. I don't think Phil Spencer would have been fired, but I mean, how many, and again, I'm not anti Matt Booty. Whenever I've seen the guy on interviews, he seems really nice. He seems like a wonderful human being. But in terms of the output, why is he in that role? And why don't they bring in someone that knows what they're doing and who's actually a history of doing this?
It's great to ask, because we were saying the same thing with 343 before Bonnie Ross had left the company. We'll say, I had said on Define Duke, I'm like, I've never seen a company so continuously fail in an awe-inspiring way and be given this long leash with arguably their most important IP. It was infuriating to watch. And I'm not even like a Halo diehard in the scheme of things. Like, I love Halo, but not like some people out there. So for me, it was so frustrating. And yeah, I think a lot of it's the same with Matt Booty. I mean, a lot of people immediately came for him with Redfall. They're like, what is this guy doing? Like, what is happening? And then immediately a lot of reports came out, a lot of statements came out, creating that separation. The pipeline wasn't there, and that he's just overseeing Xbox Game Studios, which has produced good games. And I think, again, that's where the protective, what I talked about earlier with the fanboys and the protective nature of these personalities more than workers does plague the product a bit. And, I don't know. The problem is, like, I don't know the nature of his job and what his day-to-day is. It may not be Booty. Maybe it's someone else, but certainly Phil Spencer or his boss knows the hierarchy and says, here are the pressure points that we need to push on to get rid of replace. I mean, whoever it is. Maybe it's not Matt Booty at all, but something is not working. There's no doubt.
Why are they reticent to fix it?
Yeah, there's no doubt that I think it's I think Colin, you mentioned this about EA with BioWare, and I think much of the same with Xbox. I think Xbox is genuinely mortified at any massive optical loss. Like, I distinctly remember, here's an example. I distinctly remember when they were moving to $70 games, right? With Redfall, Starfield, and so on. Xbox had sent creators, press, an email, and they're like, hey, we just want to let you know this news is coming. And I don't give a shit. I'm just like, okay, you're there with everyone else. It's really about the quality of the game. This was naturally going to happen. And they were kind of the last to step into that. So I didn't think it was that big of a deal in the scheme of things. But to me, that communicated to me, okay, you guys are scared that, like, you're going to get destroyed because you haven't really delivered much, especially in quality. And now you're going up to 70 without much reason, just on promise alone, which has been the defining word for the series generation, is promise. Yeah, but where's the delivery? So I think it's that, Jeffy. I think it's really just a lot of fear in that company. Much like we talk about, I might be loosely remembering this. So Colin, you'd probably be able to clean this up, but PlayStation with the Vita, where they saw the potential, I think it was like a hole in the system almost that could lead to a similar PSN hack. And they kind of just shut down the Vita operation completely, despite the promise that was there, because of the fear of how bad it was for them during that stretch of time. And I think with Xbox, they're very scared to have those types of optical losses. So getting rid of major figures, the headlines. Oh boy, here we go. Xbox at it again. And I think rightfully so. You earn that smoke when you don't produce.
The headlines of 68 Metacritic on Redfall.
Right.
I mean, which one's worse?
Right. No, exactly. And that's the thing. I think they sometimes have their head up their own ass, and it's frustrating, especially that's why, again, I think it's very much like Mets baseball. It's like, you got Steve Cohen as the owner, you got one of the richest men on the planet, you have the biggest pay salary cap in baseball right now, and you're still fucking losing. How do you do that? And I think it's the same thing. It's that sports fanship for Xbox, and why, despite some negative products and some great memories with it, it's like this frustration, but this anticipation for them to kind of be great again. Because they've done, I don't want to shortchange Game Pass. Like, I think I'm with you, Jaffe. I'm very pro Game Pass. I think it's fantastic. But people want to see now first party. And so I think that's where this is a big stepping stone for them. I'm getting a little off topic, but that was really the last of my thoughts, just to wrap it up. That was the last of anything I personally had to add to the conversation.
Yeah, I think Yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, my whole outlook remains I'm not going to let me back up because we're talking about sports, and I know people hate when we double down on the sports analogies, but it's funny. Like, I grew up as everyone knows, a big Yankee fan, and our family Yankee fans still to this day. And I really became disinterested deeply in baseball as a Yankee fan the longer it went on, because it just seemed kind of strange that, wasn't it true, Dig, that A-Rod made more money than an entire roster during his time with the Yankees? I think he in 1 year, A-Rod made more money, like one of our players, than I think all of the Pirates or something. Like, it was something.
Yeah, I think that by the time it went from Seattle to Texas to New York, it got so big that it was ridiculous.
And yeah, like that new deal that he signed. And I was like, this fucking sucks. Like, that was kind of, and I was saying that as a Yankee fan. I saw the Yankees as a active diehard fan. I saw the Yankees win 5 times, and it was awesome. But in hindsight, it's like, it's kind of fucking sad, really, that that baseball doesn't have a salary cap where it could be truly about who could do it the best under the same rules. But that's a forced reality, right? Like, the salary cap is anti-competitive in some ways, because it doesn't allow teams to do what they want to do, but they have to agree to it in order to play in the league. So it's like, it's keeping everyone down in order to make parity. That's not the way economic capitalism works. And I understand that. Like, that's
all sports, just like elections, should be publicly funded. I'm not even fucking with you. We'd get better games.
I think we should get the government out of sports completely. Why am I saluting?
No. I mean, elections should be taxpayer.
Oh, I misunderstood. No.
Sports.
I see. Yeah.
Because then it's just like the people who really want to play. There's not going to be any of this like billionaire fucking. No, fuck you. Because it's never fair.
So what I'm saying is that I think, at the end of the day,
Colin's like, stick to games, nerd. You don't know anything.
What I'm saying at the end of the day is that I understand that a lot of my consternation about this personally has nothing to do with the intractable laws of economics. Like, I totally get it. And I know that competition often makes companies better too. But I'm fessing up to the point that understanding all of that, I have this feeling that in the mid and long term, this level of consolidation and this forced moneyed kind of recalibration of the way we buy games and the way we invest in games and all of that, I think is going to have a really bad effect on video games. I truly do. Like, maybe not for video games as most people experience them, but again, I have to look at things myopically. This is a PlayStation, or this isn't, but I do a PlayStation podcast, and so we do it from that perspective. If I'm a mobile gamer, if I just play Call of Duty, if I love Game Pass because it's cheaper than me buying games a la carte, and I want to try a lot of different things, all of that, I don't blame anyone for doing any of that stuff. I can only.
What if you just love games?
I'm sorry?
What if you don't care? I love the medium. I love games.
Yeah, me too.
Right? So I'm in it for who can provide me the best entertainment. I don't care who publishes it or who makes it. If that's your perspective, how do you view it?
Yeah, that's not my perspective. Very similar to music. I care about who produces the games, and I'm attracted to certain producers, certain well, not producers, but producers of games, certain labels and developers, publishers. Certainly. I mean, absolutely. And I would put greater trust into them than rogue operations that occasionally create good games, or like couldn't seem to fucking buy a game. And I'm not saying by the way, I'm not even making fun of Microsoft in that regard. In my mind,
that's why I laughed.
I'm sorry. I was actually more thinking about Sega, like without like I just always make fun of them, but they're doing great. My making fun of Sega is years old now because it doesn't make any sense anymore. But
everybody buys everything, right? Sony is just as guilty as Microsoft of using what money they have to buy success.
Definitely. Sure. That's why I said Matt Stoller said that they are pigs. That's how he calls them, as pigs. Yeah,
the narrative of, I don't just mean at a big level, but if Sony spends a lot of money to outbid Capcom for a programmer, that's no different than Microsoft spending a lot of money to buy Activision. It's using your resources in your war chest to win. And they just don't have the same resources. But the idea that Sony's take is always painted as more noble, I just sometimes go, they're doing the same thing. They just can't afford to do it as big. If they could, they would. You think Sony would be? No, I mean, seriously, ask yourself, if Jim Ryan had the ability to buy Activision, you think he'd say, well, I'd like to, but that's not how we do it here. We need to court first. You go give me fucking Activision.
Well, wait, but what makes you say that when they could buy publishers and they don't? I guess that's what I'm curious about. Like, what? So they could have Activision, but they wouldn't be uninterested in any of the publishers below them that they could acquire right now.
I'm sure they're out there always looking. I think. I mean, if I think what you said was correct, which is the playing board is shifting. So break the glass because they may have to do that. They haven't been compelled to sort of spend that money.
Exactly.
But if somebody came up to Jim Ryan and said, would you like Activision? He wouldn't say, oh, well, no, we'll do some exclusive games and see if they're a good fit. He'd be like, oh, yes, please. I'm just saying, I don't like how somebody's painted like this kind of much more noble creature.
I'm not. I understand that. Because you're right about the nobility thing. It's all money. And like you said, none of them are friends. And I totally agree with that. But however, I don't agree with the Sony would take Activision if it was available.
Really?
No, I don't.
If they were offered it for free.
For free, yeah. I think
but I'm saying if there was no FTC and whatever, and they're just like, hey,
I mean, if they could,
we're thinking of buying this.
I'm sure if they could do whatever they wanted, they would consolidate the entire industry under PlayStation. But I just, what I'm saying is that, and this is what I was saying about them having an equal 120 developer long list in there, deep within the annals of Sony's email system, where they would it's like that would be interesting if they ever acted like that. Like, you wouldn't just go for Activision, you would go for the smaller ones first, wouldn't you?
For Capcom,
right? Capcom, Square Enix, Tecmo Koei, Bandai Namco, Sega. I mean, all the Japanese ones, nonetheless, big publishers. So that's my whole point, and that's, I guess, what I'm lamenting is they have to play that game now. But that, to me, if they were presented these amazing deals, maybe they would take them, and I think that that's obvious, and they would be right to do that from a naturalistic economic perspective, like we said. However, I also think that there's no evidence that they've ever acted like that, and that's been my whole urgent argument for a while, is that the acquisitions of these kind of one night stand developers that they've been doing is a sign of changing times. So is the acquisition of Valkyrie. So is the acquisition of what's why can't I think of the PC developer? Nix's.
Blizzard. Like they bought.
Right. Exactly. That Sony, Sony has started to break their mold. You can already tell that they're starting to play on this changing playing field. And I lament that, because I don't really, and this goes back to the big baseball versus small market baseball, where it's like, I don't really get excited about companies spending money. I get excited about the output. And I just want the output to continue to remain high quality. And that's it.
Can I ask Matty one final question?
Please.
So what do you think if this isn't the way it's laid out? And I think Bobby Kotick is probably the devil, like literally, and I don't believe in God or any of that, but he's probably the devil. But don't you think if they were the acquisition to go through, it almost feels like the better play is to acquire Activision and put Bobby Kotick in charge? Because the guy can't fucking miss, right? The guy's a piece of shit. He's a greedy motherfucker. I don't trust him. I think he has a terrible company when it comes to when he lies about there's no sexual harassment, whatever. But for that aside, though, the guy seems to be able to fucking make the shit work, and no one at Xbox seems to be able to. Why in the world would you buy Activision and not take Bobby Kotick and put him into the driver's seat of everything at Xbox?
Oh, man. I mean, I never thought of it that way, to put him in the driver's seat of all of that. I mean, because I think it's been reported, I know it's been reported, and the general understanding is following that sexual harassment suit that he's taken the golden parachute out. And that's why it was so surprising under oath. Like Colin said, he kind of threw Game Pass under the bus, because it's like, I guess for him, he's like, I'm getting at least $3 billion out of this. Like, we're getting injected with some kind of cash if this gets canceled. And if it goes through, I have even more money to fly out of here with. So the real question, I guess, is like, if he's out, if the deal doesn't go through or not. But I think there's value to him on I share your thoughts, by the way, but on a strict business level, there's value to him. I really wonder if getting someone in a position of overseeing studios, I think that's why Xbox is buying publishers, because they have seen how, again, I think it's the lesson of the initiative, the lesson of their output. Like, it's really difficult to get someone who's truly great at this, not to go after Matt Booty, because again, I don't know his day to day. And a lot of the Xbox output has, at least Metacritic wise, been on the incline, but they're buying these publishers so they can manage themselves. Right. And so I don't know if they're trying to poach their talent and say like, okay, come handle our shit now. I'm with you. I think Rod Ferguson's a great get. I think Cog calls him the finisher because that's what he likes to do, is get into the middle of things and help them wrap up. And that's why he's just bounced from team to team to team, to my understanding. So I think they need a guy like that who just understands like, okay, how do we get to the finish line? Because a lot of games are talked about the creative, right? The creative spark, the beginning of this, and that. But little people are giving credit on like closing the door, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a great question to ask. It's actually not a perspective I've personally considered. I don't know if you throw Bobby in that type of role, because I'm sure, knowing Xbox's reluctance to let people go or move them around, it's like, well, where do we put Matt now? I don't think it would ever happen, but it's an interesting school of thought there to see how they can move some chess pieces around the board with talent that they do get.
You can let Matt work on Blinks the Time Cat.
Yeah, why not, right?
$150 million budget. Okay, we're back for the next 2 topics. Typically, we'd have 3 topics. However, Dagan is having technical issues on his end. And so that we could wait for him. Basically, his upload speeds are really bad. And so his Zencaster upload is struggling. We can't have him back on the show until he's done uploading. It looks like it's going to take hours based on the rate in which it's going. So we have to lose him for now. Now it's just the 3 of us. I'm sure everyone's disappointed. They're really here for Dagan, not me.
This is Constellation's Battle Royale. We'll see who's next.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see who's next. So I'm excited about these other 2 topics. Dagan will do 2 topics next week to make up for his lost topic this week. And in fact, his topic this week was pretty interesting. I wanted to talk about it, but we'll put it away for now. Matty, let's go to you first.
Okay.
I'm curious what your topic is and what you'd like to talk about this week.
Yeah, I was, it's funny. I usually have a topic pretty heavily prepped before this show, but the whole week I was really thinking, what am I going to want to talk about? Actually, 2 weeks now, because I was going to be on last week possibly. And it's like, what am I going to talk about? And as I'm getting my hair cut, that's when it hit me. I was like, self-care. Another reason it hit me was, and really to kind of kick it over to you guys quick, is for my birthday, which is June 20th.
Happy belated birthday. I don't think I knew that. I'm not good at keeping track of people's birthdays. I'm sorry about that.
I don't take any offense if people forget my birthday or whatever. I forget people's birthdays all the time. And it's not like it's less important to me. It's just like, right. Like that specific day on the calendar. I just need to write it down. That's my problem. But yeah, my fiance took me to a spa, the Sojo Spa Club, for those who are wondering. It's in like Edgewater, and beautiful view. And you can like see the skyline of the city and of New York City, I should say. And lots of like Japanese inspired tubs or baths, I should say. Very much a whole place as a spa would be, based around relaxation. It's like 6 floors of just things to unwind. And the reason she took me there is she's like, you need to, take a load off. We're about to move homes, and I'm working on a game and 2 channels. And so I love what I do. It's just, it eats up a lot of my day. And so I run kind of high stress. And the way my body functions is that I don't feel like, right now I'm cool as a cucumber. I feel good, but I think my body's just gotten really good at suppressing the stress. So when it comes out, it's like heavy. When I feel stress, like, it's hardcore stress. So I realized with that, and funny enough, this haircut in tandem, it's like, I need to do some things that just are solely based around self-pleasuring, which is probably an awful term to use. Self-care, as in things like, there you go, perfect.
Generation of dryness.
Yeah, I'm very sexual this episode. I don't know what's going on with me.
Cool, that's right.
But I was thinking about things I could do to sort of take better care of myself beyond the what I would call the bare necessities, like shower, brush your teeth, maybe exercise if you got the time most days. Things like something more luxurious, a spa, something simple like a nap. I never nap. And some people just aren't built to, but just things to get me into a better quality of life where I feel these things that do stress me out, even if I love them, wouldn't stress me as much if I found better time to kind of carve out just chunks of the day for myself to do something solely for me, whether it's going on a drive or something random like apple picking. I don't freaking know, but just stuff that involves me taking care of myself or enjoying myself more. And so I guess I wanted to kick to both of you guys, if you focus on these types of things or struggle to focus on these types of things, and what do you do in particular to unwind that is maybe easier, not super out of the way too, because something like a spa, I'm not going to go to a spa every fucking week. Not only is that expensive, but that's just, I don't think I need that. It's like I need stuff maybe at home or whatever. So, I mean, whichever one of you two has something coming to mind, feel free. But that's what I want to talk about, is just self-care.
Yeah. Jaffe, go ahead. Do you have anything to say?
Well, look at me. I mean, do I look like I participate in self-care?
Yes, actually.
Well, what I will tell you is, I mean, I think, like you said, you love what you do. We're all very fortunate in that we really enjoy our day-to-day occupations and whatnot, right? So I don't really feel like what I do is work. Maybe people who watch what I do would go, no, Jaffe, you're right. It's not. But I love it so much that I don't feel like it's work, right? I just enjoy it. So, but that said, though, yeah, there are times you need to be still and be quiet and just love yourself and get back to self-pleasuring, right? Yeah. But I'm with you on that, and I don't think anybody does it enough. I will tell you, when you were talking about the spa, I've been to spas, and I used to love before the pandemic. We would go get massages and stuff, and that was wonderful. Nice. Although I have to tell you a real quick story. I'll tangent briefly, but I'll get back to your question.
Story about a massage. Where's this going?
I go to Japan for the first time. Actually it's the second time, and I was divorced and stuff at the time, so it wasn't a big deal. And I'm like, I'm going to get a fucking sexy massage lady, like a Japanese masseuse, And so I called down at the front desk. We're staying in a nice hotel. It was some Sony function or something. And they send up this like 70-year-old battle axe of a Japanese lady. They're like, lie down. I'm doing the accent. I married a Japanese woman. My mother-in-law is full Japanese. Don't fucking come at me being racist. That's what she sounded like to my American ear. And there was nothing sexual about it. I'm like, if you put a gun to my head and said, get aroused, just kill me. Just shoot me. It was the most just uncomfortable. It's in my room. It's not, and here's a 70-year-old lady. Like, take clothes off. Oh, God. It just wasn't pleasant at all. But that said, though, I understand the massage things. But when you were talking about that, what I was thinking about, one of my joys of the day, and it's a small pleasure, but sometimes it's all you need, is I call them lunch games, right? It used to be Hearthstone. And I used to love, even when I was making video games and all the crazy and shit, when it was lunchtime, I loved going out, getting lunch or bringing my lunch, getting from the fridge, heating it up, and just losing myself to Hearthstone for like 45 minutes, because it's one of those games you can play with the mouse and you can eat with your other hand, right? So you can get things done at once. Now it's Marvel Snap. For me, Marvel Snap is just that moment of the day where I'm eating, I'm playing this game that just makes my brain happy. And it feels like something I'm doing just for me. But I don't do things just for me enough outside of the work that I love. And I imagine there's value in thinking about that. Like your fiance is like, hey, you need to bring this kind of mindset into your life more. I think that's good advice for a lot of people, including me. So I don't have a lot to say, because you saying it makes me aware that I don't do it near as much as I should.
The lunch games is a really good idea. Colin, is there anything you want to throw up for I just run with that a mile?
Sure. I mean, yeah. I was writing some things down. I actually wanted to ask you a question, which is, and I guess you guys can both answer this, which is like, how specifically does your stress and anxiety affect you or play out in your life? Because for me, like, I'm seeing a therapist now, right? And I see therapists on and off, and I think therapy is good. I've long thought that. I had a little bit of time, like when I was in college, where I was kind of like, I don't really believe in the efficacy of this, but generally speaking, I think it's good to talk to someone who is like paid to listen to you and like has some idea of what might be wrong with you. And I've said before that I would love at some point, it's expensive and time consuming, but I would just do total psychoanalysis. And I want to do that at some point, like 3 times a week, intensive 2-hour things where you get fucking crazy. I would love to do that at some point. So I think that's generally good. But one of the things that comes up or came up when I started seeing this new therapist was, they're asking you the various kind of questions, the big questions, so they can get and burrow deeper. And they're like, so like, how does your anxiety like play out? Do you have like panic attacks and stuff? And I'm like, I don't think I've ever had a panic attack in my entire life. And they were like, what does that mean? You're like, you're stressed and anxious. But I'm like, I am like a ball, like a fucking knot inside of me at all times. Like that is just my existence. It's a sense of like low level dread. It never goes away. And so it affects my life in the sense that it's like in everything I do, but it doesn't play out in that like I'm like inoperable at some point or just out of it or need time to rest or whatever. I just kind of have plowed through it somehow. And I think much to my own detriment, my own mental detriment. And at this time, over the last few months, as I've told the audience in the past, and I don't know, maybe there are changes that people can tell. I have no idea, but it's like I'm trying to unwind myself from some of the medication that I'm taking, at least at the dose I was taking the medication at. I've cut my anxiety meds by 3/4, and I've cut my depression meds by half. Because I don't want to be beholden to this stuff. So I guess what I'm asking
is, have you noticed a difference?
Yeah, definitely. I'm like,
a good or bad?
Like, no, bad. Bad.
Yeah.
Like,
when did this start? I asked because the last time I was on the show with you at the beginning, I said you seem kind of, if you go back to the very beginning, I don't know if you were recording it. I was like, you seem a little, no, I'm fine. And I do notice it now. I'm not going to lie. You seem a little, not cranky, but.
Interesting. Well, I mean, that could be possible. The question what I'm trying to get to in my own mind is it better for me to be totally hyper medicated? I was really medicated for a while. Or is it better for me to like try to figure this out so that like I don't feel like I have this twisting knot inside of me at all times? And I blame a lot of it on my parents' divorce. And I know that's where it came from. And I think it was like at a very formative and seminal time. It's like, it explains many things in my life. I've gone over this voluminously on our show in the past about like the various things that I'm like fixated on and why I think they all draw back to my parents getting divorced. But ever since that moment, I've had that feeling inside me. And I just learned to deal with it. But I know that it affects everything around me. And I guess what I'm asking is, how do these things manifest in your own lives? Or are you similar? Where it's just kind of this thing that rides. Because I know people that are like, I'm having a panic attack. I've known people that had to be hospitalized for panic attacks, which to me is like, I'd be really scared to know what was happening in my life where I'd be that debilitated. Like
I had a panic attack.
Yeah. Before. Yeah. I'd like to know. So can you guys talk to me a little bit about that?
Well, but obviously I want to let, because Matty, I guess he's asking, right, how it manifests with you, because you are saying you struggle with it a lot. I don't. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious as well. Is it the similar thing with Colin?
The anxiety aspect, no. I have had panic attacks. I've had 2 this year, which I say that not to celebrate, but more to be like, it's exceedingly rare for me. So that was the kind of the sign to me. I'm in a very high stress mode.
May I ask what brought them on?
Yeah, it's funny, right? Remember I said it just kind of comes out of me aggressively. I distinctly remember I was actually here, in the other room. I have a room down the hallway that's got like a TV in it and a couch. And it's funny, I was kind of doing what Jaffe mentioned. I was trying to focus on like, let me take a load off. And I think when that happens, because I don't do it enough, sometimes think of it like a sealed door, and then out it comes, right? And so what happened was I was just sitting there and I had this instant feeling of like, holy fuck, I got to get up and get out of here. And it was really, because I hadn't had one in so long, it was this very, very perplexing feeling of like, I had my food on my lap and I put it on the table, stood up and was getting ready to walk out the door. I was like, I need to get out of here. I was like, and I stopped and I started to calm down. Like a moment later, I was like, holy crap. I was like, that was kind of scary. Like I'm safe in this office. There was no harm, no threat. And my fight or flight just went like that, just on in a flash. I just had to get out. And I've had 2. And typically what happens is lack of sleep, high stress. If I don't get my sleep, my brain, like any brain, is going to function at like half to a quarter capacity. Just, I need to get my 7 to 8 hours. So I think it was that combined with like, Jaffe, I'm sure you can you could definitely relate to this. Like trying to get funding for your game. I've had a lot of anxiety about that. And then just managing the channels I do, my aspirations in life, managing the shows we do here for LSM, all stuff like you said, I view it as a blessing, but at the same time, it's like I've taken on so much that it can definitely eat me up in certain days. Yeah. But otherwise, like the I view it as a eustress, because how I try to view it is, all right, I cut it all out. Let's say I cancel the game, I shut down Retro Rebound, I just funnel my life into like one thing, Defining Duke, occasional LSM shows, and my Mr. Matty videos. Then I'd be like, I'm bored. I want to go do something. I want that stress, almost like I want that pressure. I want to do something. Like I almost view it as like I want to do something great. Is how my brain thinks about it. So I'm getting off the trail here, but when it comes to my anxiety, it's more like a sense of, maybe it's kind of similar to Colin. I wouldn't say a knot in my stomach. It's more like a sense of unease. I've left something undone and I don't know what that is. But I think it's because so much of what I work on is very long form. And obviously in the day-to-day operation, the work is never done. There's always more you could have done to then have a sense of finality. So a lot of it's been, for me, a focus at finding peace at the end of the day, which I've done a really great job of, like finishing a video out, finishing the show out, whatever it may be, and be like, okay, line drawn, weekend off, we're good. Like after this, I'm going to schedule the video that Locke had helped edit. I have the thumbnail made, and that's the line drawn. It's like, boom, my day is done, and I make peace with that. And that's helped in managing it quite a bit. But yeah, it really does stem, because it's funny, like I think Colin, you've said as much, but I know we get the comments occasionally like, man, Matty, like, how do you manage your schedule and stuff? And I think I managed extremely well, but I do run a tight ship where it's almost a double-edged sword. It's very nice. I get to fit a lot in, but then back to the topic, there's not much room for me, for myself, for my breathing room, outside of putting my feet up at the end of every night and playing some games, which is the joy of my day. Most times it's like, outside of working in games, it's getting to play them. Just like, okay, like let's just have some fun now. And I think last thing I'll say is that's because I've always structured my days as sort of earning your luxury time. It's something I always give people, like people who are looking for just general day-to-day advice. I just think front load your day with all of your responsibilities, work, etc., and then make sure at the end you reward yourself. And so I think some days get so full that my reward may be like at 10 p.m. at night, and then I play games till like maybe midnight, 1 a.m., and then off to bed. And so then you get into that bad work cycle where you're just,
that's your sleep gets fucked.
Because your sleep gets fucked. That's all you're doing. So long answer, but yeah, that's why I was trying to really pick your guys' brains on self-care awareness or just what you may do. I love the lunch games idea. That's awesome, because I've always been apprehensive to phone games, quite frankly, but like Marvel Snap has always had my eye. And I think that's a really
Marvel
good
Snap?
I've never played it.
How are you apprehensive? What does that even mean? I
think it's because I have I stigmatize them a bit. I think I kind of look at, broken.
They should be stigmatized, by the way.
No, they shouldn't. They're games. You guys are such snobs. You're just like all these fucking fanboys. Listen, they're games. You guys make games, motherfucker. You make Hybroxia, which is basically a phone game. You make the Chef Happy Super Chef game, which I played and liked. That's a phone game.
Super Harold's Bacon.
Yeah. I like a little chef guy.
I wish we couldn't get those. Well, Hybroxia might work. We could probably get that on a phone. I wouldn't want anyone to play Super Perils on a phone. That would be horrible. But
my point though is different. I'll get back to it. But I have to say though, that's a ridiculous. If you play Apple Arcade, it's $4.99 a month, or there's another one called Game Crazy. It's like $2.99 a month. No microtransactions, no ads. They've gone in and they've curated great games that just happen to be on a phone. It's
funny you bring up Apple Arcade, because I saw they had a TMNT game, and I'm like considering bending the knee. I'm just like, that looks.
It's great. And there's a game they just announced yesterday that Netflix is coming out with, Storyteller, which is a Steam game right now. But you guys would both, I imagine, love it, because it's a thinky game where you get 6 comic book panels, and at the top of the thing they give you a title, right? And the title might be like Love and Death, okay? And then at the bottom you've got like a cast of characters and a cast of visual representation of verbs, and you can take the characters and the verbs and put them in any order in those 6 comic book panels. All the game asks of you is that at the end, the story you have told with the placement of those items is reflective of Love and Death, or whatever the title is. And it is clever. It is fun. It is And to say that because it's on a phone, boy, you guys are missing out. Marvel Snap is one of the best strategic casual games I've played in years.
I really want to try it out.
It's
that'll be where I bend the knee for sure.
Yeah.
Can I say something to this real quick?
Sure.
Because I never even really I went right back to Matty and never even talked about like my own stress. I wanted to talk about that in a second too, but if I might, I've never pretended, because this comes up every once in a while. I've never in my entire career pretended to be agnostic, when it comes to like where I play games, who makes them, like all games being equal. Like that's not the way I look at content at all. I've never looked at it like that. And so, yeah, I do look at, do I look down at phone games? I think there are some great phone games, sure. But yeah, I look down at the market. I look down at what that market did to console gaming, where all of the like horrible shit that everyone hates in console gaming, like microtransactions and free to play games, come from that space. I think I don't look at all things being equal at all. So yeah, that it would be like, if, for instance, if someone tells me there's a good HBO show, I take that a lot more seriously than if someone tells me there's a good CBS All Access show or a Paramount Plus show.
Open your heart, Colin. Open your heart.
But I wanted to say this because because I don't know if people can relate. I first became medicated for depression and anxiety deep into my life. I like really wrote it for a long time, and I actually think it was pretty good for me in some ways. Like my anxiety.
I want to make sure I understand.
Yep.
You came to medication late?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very late.
Okay.
And like in my early 30s. And I was in many situations in my life where I made my anxiety work for me. And it got to a point where I couldn't manage it anymore. It actually came out, Matty, what you were saying earlier about sleeping, where I couldn't sleep, which was very unusual for me because I didn't really have problems sleeping. And then I would go, like when you have that first sleep where you sleep for 3 or 4 hours, you might get up and go to the bathroom and pee, and then you go back. Yeah. Like I would get that in, and then that would be the end. And it was like killing me. This was early during the CLS era in like 2017 into 2018. But I must have, and so I used my anxiety. The only thing that makes my anxiety better in some ways is to like do material things, make more money, get things paid for, get things done, have fewer tasks to complete, like things I feel like I can control. I've been really strict about that. And so that helped me in college a great deal, where it's like, if you just read these books and go to these lectures, you'll ace the test, like just do the work and get it done and do it. Right. And like, you won't have anxiety about it. But my life became unmanageable in some ways because I had so many different things wrapped up where I couldn't manage my stress and anxiety. And I think I was starting to break down, and I think it was coming out in sleeping. So I became medicated, and I started taking Ativan, and I started taking Lexapro. Lexapro is an antidepressant. Ativan is an anti-anxiety med, and a controlled substance. And I was on big ass doses of them. 40 milligrams of Lexapro, which is apparently incredibly high, although the person that put me on it didn't tell me that. And like 4 milligrams or something it was 2 milligrams and 0.5 tablets of Ativan, which is a lot of Ativan too. And it worked. And I'm really grateful for it. Like I am mega, mega grateful for what medication did for me. But I began to realize, and it started to happen in weird ways, where I had no highs at all. Like I was like very mechanical. And I think it was very useful for me in a very painful part of my life, especially as I was breaking up with my ex-girlfriend in California. And all that was a horrifyingly bad situation personally. Like the entire 2018, 2019 into me moving to Virginia and all of that. And I think I only dealt with it because I was not able to really be emotional about it. Like I was physically unable. And there would be times where I would become self-aware of it in the moment and be like, why aren't I upset right now? Like this is why I know that I'm a sensitive person. So why, like I would be like, I can't cry. Like it just won't happen.
I hear that.
And I started to become nervous about it. That's why I started to try to uncouple myself. And I think it is coming out in some ways where like my spirit maybe is like a little bit more out there or whatever. And I feel it, but I wonder if that's maybe just real life. And I was becoming too dependent on a new norm as opposed to trying to get to
you felt numb to life though.
Right. Like in some way I did. Yeah.
When people complain about that, then I think getting off medication or at least changing medication makes a lot of sense, because I think just numbing the pain at the expense of other things, unless you're really almost like at wit's end, and I'm not going to say the word, but what I'm talking about, then I think it makes sense to start exploring options. Yeah, from my experience. But Are you seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist now?
Right. I was seeing a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and right now I'm just seeing a psychiatrist because I wanted to move to a different psychologist that specialized. So this guy, the psychologist I was seeing, gave me a recommendation for a psychologist that will specifically deal with this anxiety issue, and I'm seeing a psychiatrist as well.
Different medicines versus no medicine.
Yeah, he's just trying to unwind me first and then see how I feel.
Okay.
Because I was on gabapentin too. I forgot to say that. And then gabapentin became controlled while I was taking it. So I was actually on 2 controlled substances, which is also not really, it's not frowned upon, but you don't really want to be in that situation. So they're like, you really got to cut out one of these, and it's going to be the gabapentin, gotcha. Which is actually an augment drug. It's actually a drug for your heart, I think. And it just happens to do these other things. Makes your anti-anxiety medicine, I guess, stronger. So I'm grateful for it in the moment, and I really am. Like I've never, that was another thing I had with a conversation I had with my psychologist was like, have you ever been suicidal or what? Talk to me about that. And I'm like, I've honestly never been suicidal. Like I can say that. I don't say that with any sort of pride. It's just, I know people that have been suicidal. Sadly, I've known a few people that have killed themselves. I've just never truly felt that level of despair. I've always thought about, not always, but I've had thoughts where it's like, how would you do it? But I've never been in a situation where it's
just like, so you know, we're on intervention watch for you if the Xbox deal goes through.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's going to be a rope hanging over the.
That's right.
But
Colin, I can stand indeed.
So there is something almost. I've never. I guess like maybe my anxiety and depression. So there's so much to say, but what I wanted to say, I guess, ultimately is that the reason that I became a night owl in my life is because the further my day goes on, the better I feel. And this is actually the opposite of from what I understand from the therapy I've done over the years, is the exact opposite of the usual tract of depression and anxiety. That people usually wake up feeling okay, and then the dread sets in. And for me, I wake up in total dread, like a feeling of dread and anxiety about all sorts of things. And then as the day goes on, I slowly get things done and normalize my day. And, I see Micah and I see the dogs and I go for a walk and I go in the pool and I do a podcast with my friends like this. And then by dinner time, I'm feeling pretty good. And then by midnight, I'm feeling great. And I try to extract as much of it as possible because that's like my most normal time. And it kind of sucks. That's always been the way it was. That's a great contributor to why.
When do you go to bed?
I go to bed. I usually get into bed by like 1 or 2. And then I would go to bed at like 3, 4, 5. Like I'll like watch TV or read or whatever.
So like last night you got into bed at like 2 a.m.?
Yeah, last night we got probably about 1:30 last night, I would say. And then
dude, we should do like a live stream podcast at midnight. That would be the shit.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun because I don't want to say I'm not any different than that's like when I'm feeling most like myself. And I think
all the people that are up at that time, right? They can't sleep. They don't want to sleep.
That'd be fun.
All the shit they're thinking about. Come on, Colin.
I'd love to do it. I mean, I made myself available to do your show whenever you want. So just
I'm calling you tonight at midnight. Well, midnight for you is 9 for me, but we'll figure something out.
Yeah, we'll get something on I'm happy to do whatever you'd like to do. So I wanted to throw that out there. I just have the exact opposite experience that I think a lot of people have with most people have with like the anxiety and my therapy experiences, although I'm sure there are other theories, have suggested to me that I'm not really anxious, that I'm depressed. And that the manifestation of the depression is anxiety. And so I have a really hard time finding relaxation until that later time of the day. And I find my relaxation from hanging out with Micah. Micah and I often go for like a long walk, like a 1.5 mile, 2 mile walk, like in the late evening. And hang out and go in the pool and hang out with the dogs and do all these things.
How old were you when your parents divorced?
7.
Yeah. See, I mean, this is why I think therapy and mindfulness is so important for everyone to just become normalized. Because my take as a non-educated person when it comes to therapy, I know nothing except I've been in a lot of it, is and you guys, I don't know how old you are, Matty. I assume you're like 28.
28.
Okay, well, there you go.
Wow, look at you.
Good gauge.
Is that when you become an adult, you spend that first chunk running from the shit your childhood, or responding to the childhood stuff you haven't processed. And then you get settled. You make enough money that you can breathe in this society. And then you start to question the negatives that come with that.
Right.
And then I think you get to a place where you find the way you want to solve it. And I think when it comes to being 7 when your parents divorce, and I think that's why nostalgia is so powerful for a lot of people, is most people who had good enough childhoods, you want to go back to that sense of safety that wasn't real, but for your brain, it was real. Like there was always be food, there'd always be power, there'd always be love, you'd never be lonely. It was a magical time. And to have that sort of shattered at 7, you probably spent the first X number of years of your adulthood trying to just never feel that again and feel that you actually could control the chaos so that you would never feel that sense of instability again. That would be my guess.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. It's almost making me misty-eyed because it's totally accurate. Like,
and I've heard Will Smith talk about. Will Smith said basically his success, you know, for whatever he would say in the press, ultimately his parents got divorced, and everything about how hard he worked was built on the foundation of, I never want to feel the way I felt when my parents got divorced again. And then you see what's happened to him, though. He was able to run that societally successfully. The world looked in on him and said, wow, he's the most successful guy in the world. And then eventually, like we saw at the Oscars, that facade starts to crack, and you can't keep up that facade forever. And you got to get down and figure out really what you're afraid of. So I don't know anything about anything when it comes to psychoanalysis, but the fact it does seem like you're depressed. And the anxiety makes a lot of sense that it would be, because logically, what do you have to be anxious about?
No, that's exactly right. And that resonates a lot with me because you're right. Like I remember the pain of that time and then like trying to just survive. And you kind of don't even think about it. And I remember there are times in my life where I became self-aware as a kid, as a teenager, in my adult life, where I'm like, I haven't thought of that specific thing, honest to Christ, since this time. Like I actually blocked. People say that all the time. Like you compartmentalize.
You haven't thought of what?
Like let me be more specific. Like I was able to compartmentalize. The pain was so multifaceted, I think, that I was able to compartmentalize events and like the feeling of it or whatever successfully, to where I wouldn't even specifically think about things that happened. You know, like how you just think things come across your mind, and then like years later, it's like, holy shit, like that actually, I forgot about that.
Yes.
And that has happened to me a lot as I've gotten older. And it totally is true that I bounced around a lot between my parents. And then when I went to college, I think I started to become self-aware that there were certain things that like were not right with the way I felt, or like the way I was acting, the way to like compared to a lot of my peers, and that it might be based on that, like being more of a homebody and being more of like not wanting to, you know, like not being like, I always thought, I'm not sad that I didn't do this because it's really not me, but like not sleeping around, stuff like that. Like I actually think a lot of that comes from this like idealized version of like what was lost. And then when I got to IGN after I graduated college, I was starting to make a little bit of money, but I was really, you know, surviving for years. And it wasn't until kind of funny when we started to make money where I was like, okay, to your point, it was the first time in my life where I'm like, I really have nothing to truly worry about right now. Like it would be foolish of me to worry right now. And that has set in, and I've become more successful over time. And honestly, with that distance, plus I think the delta of like, of wisdom as you get older has just unlocked all of these things in my mind where I'm like, damn, dude, this is fucking crazy how much these formative things twist and turn you into this into this person.
How much older is Dagan than you?
Dagan's he was born in 73. I was born in 84.
Okay, so he was how old when the divorce happened?
He was 17.
So it didn't affect him all that much at all.
No, he like disappeared.
You can see it in his character.
Yeah. No,
he seems lighter.
Oh yeah, like my sisters were born in 75 and 79, and I was born in 84. So we all got it differently. My sister Allie, the one closest to me in age, is probably maybe the one of us that got it worst in the moment because she was like at 12.
Yeah.
So that's like a whole nother level
of needing that security for different reasons.
Right, exactly. Especially losing your mom at that time, and because our mom left our dad. So it was
and
then I also come to these conclusions sometimes where, and it's sad because I love my mom is a wonderful person, and she's one of my very best friends and like my biggest fan, and she's always been a great supporter of me. And I think she knows she probably made a mistake with the way things went down, how it went down. I think it was inexorable that they didn't want to be together, but like the way it was just very messy. And I understand that, and people can't take those things back. But I also wonder, like, how could you do that to me? And that is actually only a thing that has creeped into my mind over the last few years.
Have you done something? It makes me
misty-eyed. It's sad, but I think about that. It's like, how could you do that to me? It was the first time I ever really thought about it from that perspective, and I don't know why.
Have you done? I always mix it up with like a Electric Daisy Carnival. Is EMD is what it's called? Has your therapist talked to you about that?
No,
technique?
What is that?
It's actually, it was experimental for a long time, and it's gone mainstream, and it's not woo woo or anything like that. But it's basically, you create this space in your head. It's not hypnosis. I don't even think hypnosis works, but you go to a kind of a consciousness state where you're revisiting some traumatic moments. Right. And for me, one occurred with my mom did some just crazy shit when I was a kid, and it was in their bedroom. And for me, I reset. I mean, sexual, not that it would matter. It's still, everybody has trauma, but it wasn't like that. But it was just it always stuck with me, and it bothered me. Something my mom did that pissed me off. And I reset the scene in my mind, kind of in a different mindset that the therapist gets you in. And then I was able to reframe it. And in my reframing, I brought the Hulk from Marvel Comics, and it just screamed like a motherfucker right in my mom's face and scared the shit out of her and all that stuff. And it doesn't mean, oh, I'm cured, but it's those little steps of being able to kind of reframe things as a child. Because as an adult, like you said, your mom didn't mean any harm. She was just doing the best she could, trying to live under the circumstances she found herself in. But as a kid, your perspective is very different, and that doesn't go away just because you age out, And so that technique just allows you to reframe traumatic events, basically. Yeah. But I mean, I get it. Being mad at your parents, like, how the fuck could you? I have kids. I'm sure I've done those things. I hope to God I didn't, and we tried. But I'm sure somewhere along the lines, I've done some therapy worthy. How the fuck could you do that to me? It's never intentional. Well, it might be intentional in some cases, but it's everybody has their bag of hammers they come out of childhood with that you got to fucking figure out what you want to do with them. You know, the ironic part in our society is we get rewarded for holding onto that bag and figuring out how to make money because of the bag. And so then people get upset when you want to put the bag down. People are yelling at me, "Oh, why don't you make video games anymore?" Because it was a result of me being terrified I would be homeless, and I knew I could make a lot of fucking money doing it, and I did it, and I was miserable doing it. I was pretty good at doing it, but I was miserable. I made the people around me miserable, and I made enough money that I was able to get my shit together and go, I don't want to actually do that work anymore. But for a long time, it was my trauma that allowed me to be very successful in this society, which is probably no small accident. No,
that's very interesting insight. Didn't expect to get this deep and this emotional, but that's the way it goes. I mean, Matty, I'm sorry. Let's throw it back over to you. I mean,
no, you're good. You guys got the brain rocking and rolling. I'm sure the audience feeling the same. That was really good conversation. I think we're all products of our upbringing, and I can just so Colin, it's not just you. Like I can certainly sympathize with that because, like, without getting fully into specifics, like, I grew up around strong, emotionally reactive people. So everyone around me was either extremely pissed, extremely upset from a young age, well into my adulthood. And so a lot of people, I talked to this a bit on Defining Duke, but again, it was not like the place to just get all into it. A lot of people think I'm either, just based on how like I look at them, think I'm bad or upset or something like that. But the reaction is, the reality, is that, like I said, you're a product of your upbringing. Like my lack of reaction to many things in life is because everyone around me was so reactive, which is why I think I ended up where I was, where I'm having lunch trying to watch a video on my phone and I stand up and have a panic attack. It's like, because my body's so used to like, no, don't react. You don't want to be like that. Like the person who's flying off the handle, getting pissed and whatnot. And you see all the chaos it causes, because for me, my household role, if you would be, is peacemaker. I was always the guy who was like trying to mend things, keep things together. Same with my friends. I had a lot of friends who flew off the handle, struggled a lot with a ton of different things. And I was always the glue guy where, and you get into your deep adulthood, it's like, who's got my back? It turned out to be, you find that forgiveness in your family, but it really turned out to be my fiance. My fiance has my back through and through. And I've never had a person like that. So I love her to pieces, but it's just funny. You guys bringing that up kind of got the wheels turning of the why, right? Like, why do you feel that way? It's like, that's why. It's like, I'm so used to not reacting because I don't want to be, and it's to what Jaffe said, it's benefited me. I think the reason I was able to make a career out of this, I always joke, I'm like, I don't think I'm amazing at what I do. I try to do my best, but I think it's because I step into my role on the internet of commentating on news, which is, I feel very blessed to do. And there's certainly much harder work to do out there, but I try to step in there with very little emotion behind it because, again, my lack of reaction in life has always benefited me. It's taught me so much and it's carried into my work. It's helped me make great judgment calls when everyone else is freaking out. I just have laser focus because of that. Doesn't mean I don't feel fear or anything like that. I think my body just gets really good at camouflaging it. So I appreciate what you guys had to say. I know we were talking a bit about self-care, but it really helped me learn a bit about myself. And I'm sure, again, the audience.
That's the ultimate self-care, though. The only self-care is to know yourself and to really become aware. Exactly. I mean, everything else is just the accoutrement that you that you pick at any moment to say that's what works for me. But to me, my experience says the foundation of self-care is getting to a point where you know what part of you needs caring at what moment. The rest is just details.
No, you're totally right. Like me going to a spa isn't going to help me. This conversation may have been more productive than the spa when you think about it, right? Yeah. And so there's something extremely true about what you say with that.
This segment of Constellation is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp. If you are feeling...
And I don't use BetterHelp. I go to in-person therapy. My insurance pays for it. But that, and I'm not just saying this, I don't think they sponsor the show anyway, but I believe in things like BetterHelp because it's cool that there's at least something trying to like lower the barrier to entry because there's so many both like erected and self-erected barriers to entry, whether it's like the stigma and all of that, and like bringing down the access and the cost barrier is like a big one.
Dude, a producer I worked with used it and they were like, they had never gone to therapy. They're like, does it really work on it? He's like, I'm just going to try this because it's just texting, right? And he was like, 2 months later, he comes into the office. He's like, that's really helping me a lot. Just to have a neutral party to talk to. Like you said, Colin, somebody who can listen just to you and has the education to understand where you're coming from. There's great value there that gets, like you said, stigmatized, which is a real shame.
I think the problem that I see with a lot of people in their perspective on therapy is that they don't understand that, like, if I vent to a friend or my fiance or a family member, you can say what you want. They're likely more inclined to have my back or find a way to help me out. But when you go to a therapist, there's nothing better than the blank slate who has no fucking clue who you are, who your family is, who your friends are. They just hear it as is. And obviously, they're going to be as helpful as you're willing to get the help, right? Like, you got to be giving them the full size story, not just.
Yeah, you got to be honest. I always say that you have to be honest. It's like going to the doctor and saying, like, "Are you okay?" And you have like a gunshot wound, and you're like, "No, I'm good."
Yeah,
you can't do that,
fine, right?
The therapist is the mental equivalent of the person that you ask, "Do I look fat in this?" And they'll tell you the truth.
Yeah,
that's the only. That's it.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
And so. Yeah, I've been trying to go to therapy for the last year. I feel like overall I've been doing well enough. I think there's, like I've indicated here, places I need to really tighten up the defense and learn more about myself. I'm curious. I mean, it doesn't sound like it was a problem with you, Colin and Jaffe. I'm sure you may have something to say on is I've been calling local therapists and whatnot. Like, no one's available.
Yeah, it's hard to find availability.
It's hard, but there's a lot of telehealth therapists.
Yeah, it's my problem is I prefer in person.
Yeah, I do too.
I do. People.
I know everybody does, and everybody should. I agree. But in the absence of anything, while you're waiting for a therapist that you connect with, because that's really important. It's certainly better than doing nothing to get on a face. I mean, it's almost like the real thing. They can see you, they can see your body language, but I agree, it's nicer to go, but. Yeah. I wouldn't use that as a reason not to go at all.
No, you're right. That's a good point.
So,
Yeah, that's all I got, really.
Yeah. That was a great conversation. I always love to hear. I love just being like a conscious being, which I guess we'll get into your topic, Jaffe, interestingly enough, is I think that there's something so fascinating about how unscientific it all is. Like, it's not psychiatry. Well, I don't want to say psychiatry. Psychology is not chemistry or physics.
Right. Well, it is, but
I dated long ago. I was literally. I dated.
But I know what you're saying.
Yeah, for many years, and people, longtime fans might know. I once dated a PhD in forensic psychology, and she worked at what was the big prison above San Francisco? San Quentin. And we would get into these conversations about that, like how much of a science is it? And then like how much observation is it? And then like the subjective of the observation as opposed to like being able to repeat what you're observing. And there is like something that about psychology that crosses science with the humanities in a very unique way. And I think that that's what's so interesting about it, so that there are specific people that are principally known for a certain interpretation of what you're going through, while there really is no certain interpretation of gravity. It's just that's the way it is, and I dig that. And I think that it's like adds to the human texture, but it makes like the pain and the anguish like much more likely, I guess, just like it makes the exciting and happy and ethereal parts of life, like the things that you can't explain, make you happy, like a sun, like I love going outside and just looking at the sun going down. Like, it just seems like it's a different color every night. I always marvel at that, like little things. And I wonder what that does for me.
Accept it. Well, like I'm saying, if we ever got smart enough or encountered an alien race that was able to show us how to do it, I mean, as far as we know, all we are is just chemicals. And that feeling of watching a sunset could probably be replicated and improved if you knew exactly in the brain where to put the specific chemicals when. And so ultimately, really, all we're going after are these feeling states. So it's kind of like there's all of this work and effort and anxiety and energy spent just to get certain chemicals in the brain to hit at the right time in the right place, which is really ineffective. And I know people just like the idea of when somebody dies and it's like, I don't want a virtual chatbot of my dead mom. Yeah, you do. You don't know you do, but you do. They would say, I don't want that. I want to experience reality. What the fuck is reality? Your perception of something that's called reality is just as false and just as real as everything else.
And now we're into your topic. Right.
I guess we are, not intentionally. I didn't mean to transition that way. But my topic is, and it's really tied to this. I went to therapy about 2 months ago because my psychiatrist who prescribes me ADD meds was retiring. And so I went to a new one just for a face-to-face so she could get to know me and then start giving me meds every X number of months whenever I run out. And so, part of that consultation or meeting was like, well, how are you doing? What's going on? And I said to her, I'm not depressed. I don't feel sad, but the older I'm getting, I'm feeling more disengaged with reality. And I don't mean that like I'm going crazy. I'm aware of what the concept of reality is. I don't, there's an actual psychological malady called derealization, which is an actual thing where you'll start seeing different colors and people change sizes. And it wasn't, I'm not schizophrenic or I'm not having like a what's real, but intellectually and maybe emotionally, I got to a point where I started becoming apathetic, not because I didn't care, like I still love things, I'm still interested in things, I still love this job and all that, but I started recognizing for me that reality is really just like, I don't know if I trust it. I don't know. Everything from, I started sleeping a lot more because I have this CPAP machine because I have apnea, which has allowed me to sleep longer, deeper, stay longer in REM state. And I dream about people who have passed on, my parents, friends, all the time, like all the time.
The best and the worst.
Well, no, it's not. My brain doesn't know the difference. I'm spending time with my dead parents. And the other night I had a dream where I was talking to them and I said, this just feels more like a dream than just a dream. And they said, this is just sort of how we're able to connect right now. Most people don't remember it. Now, I'm not saying that's real or not, but what I'm saying is I go to this therapist and I say, I don't trust what I'm seeing anymore. And I was watching this podcast, and so she wasn't like, oh, you're sick, you're depressed or anything. But she's like, yeah, I said, to me, that's what drives me. I want to look behind the curtain. I don't believe this is all there is. And I don't know how to look behind the curtain except just to read and watch videos and talk to people about it. And I was, this, what's his name, Lex Friedman?
Yeah, Lex Friedman. Yeah, he's great.
So he did this interview with this guy, Donald Hoffman. I haven't read his book called The Case Against Reality, but it was a really fascinating interview he did where he was, Hoffman was basically saying, mathematically speaking, and to him, it made him very anxious and very depressed. He said, you really, when you look at the mechanics of it and you look at the physics of it and you look at the math of it, you become very quickly aware that this isn't real and that our perceptions not only create a lot of our reality, but things like fringe ideas like quantum immortality. I don't know if you guys have experienced that. I'm sure you have. You may not have known what it was, but the theory in a very poorly defined way is, it's kind of like multiverse. It's kind of like multiple timelines. So when you die, if there is a physical way for you to survive that death, your consciousness goes to that track. So somewhere in another timeline, you have died multiple times, right? But you don't, it doesn't track. Well, the older I've gotten, the more experiences I've had where I'm like, something happened there. And I'm not saying I know that for a fact. I don't know. Maybe it's just the way my chemicals move in my brain. I don't have a dog in the fight. It just feels that way. I remember I may have already told you the story, but I'm driving down, taking my son to an improv class about 4 years ago, and the back window of the car just shatters, just on the freeway, right? And I'm like, do not look back because he'll be dead. Somebody just shot us, right? That's what I thought. And what it turned out was, at least in this timeline, a week ago, a little pebble hit the glass, and eventually over time it degraded the integrity of the structure, and that's just when it happened to collapse. But I knew at that moment, just like I knew when I was in E3 once and I almost got in a car accident, was riding in a cab going to the convention center, that car that almost hit us, that car hit us. Like, I should have been in that accident that just happened, right? Have you guys not had those experiences where you go... Like
someone in you're Jaffe in another timeline got hit by the car.
Well, yeah, or something, that was a moment right there.
Are you suggesting that the moment was altered in real time, like in some way?
I don't know what I'm suggesting, other than to say that there are moments that I've experienced where it feels like whether the timeline split, or it feels like, yes, maybe there was a pause. Or if you play a lot of video games, which I know you both do, you play a video game, you die, you respawn, you're back to where you were. So you as the character, when I'm playing Elden Ring, the guy doesn't know he's died a bajillion times because I suck at it. But I have the awareness. But in his mind, if you were to edit his whole adventure without the death, that would probably be what life is like. And I'm not coming here proselytizing this theory. I'm saying that more and more of these things as I get older, I begin to recognize or see or think about, and it pulls me away from the day-to-day, which is why I think I'm so apathetic about a lot of the things that maybe younger people or just other people are hustling for. Because, this guy that was on Hoffman is talking about, he's like, it is like a video game. He's like, oh, I want that Porsche. He called it a Porsche, which I guess it is a Porsche. It doesn't matter. He called it a Porsche. And he's like, that's the game I'm playing right now. I want to make enough money and make the right move so I can afford to have that car. And he's like, but once you start having these, in his case, mathematical realizations about reality and thought affecting reality, he's like, it's all bullshit. He's like, none of it is real. None of it matters. He's not saying nothing matters, but he's saying this, I think he called it an interface. The interface that we are in is absolutely, according to him, I don't know how fringe he is, mathematically provable to be an illusion. And I think for me, that hasn't made me sad or depressed. And it hasn't made me apathetic. Apathy probably brought me to these points of interest in my life. But for me, I don't buy it anymore. Like, and I don't know what to do with that data. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to contribute any insight. You know, I mean, even that, think about that. There's probably somebody listening to this show, either now or 100 years in the future in some weird archive, and they just find it, that this conversation could, trigger someone to say, that interests me. And they go on to actually maybe make a contribution in that particular science, because that's the other part that fascinates me, is how connected everything fucking is. And I don't mean that woo-woo or Oprah or metaphorical. I mean literally. When you become aware that if you smile at somebody at a grocery store, you have no idea that smile may mean nothing to you, and that makes them feel good enough to nod at somebody else, and that person was on the way to do some self-harm to themselves or something. You just don't know the ripple effect. But the older you get, that everything you do has a ripple effect. People listening right now to this fucking show, think about that. People listening right now to this fucking show, something one of us, the 3 or 4 of us, have said in this show could very well plant a seed that allows that person to go on to some kind of genuine joy in their life, or give someone else that. I don't trust reality anymore. That's my topic. Yes. The worst thing Colin's Last Stand ever did was send me this fucking Zoom com, whatever the fuck it is, because I love it so much. I'll shut up now.
I'm glad you like it. I
love it.
Yeah, Matty, what do you have something to say on this topic of reality?
I was gonna say, it almost sounds like a fascination with the butterfly effect. Obviously, it goes deeper for that than you. But one thing that I always think of is this one time I went over to my friend's house for Halloween. And we were 7th, 8th grade, so 12, 13 years old, around there. And we decided to do what kids do, ding dong ditch, egg a couple of houses. And so I remember we ding dong ditched this one house. And as we're walking down the streets, the pitch black, I hear a car unlock. And everyone's walking around just talking as we're in the road going to the next house to prank. And then I hear a car turn on. Everyone's still walking around. And I'm like, guys, like, that guy is definitely coming for us. Like, he's definitely coming for us. And they're like, no, it's fine. I'm like, no, seriously, like, we got to move. And so we hear a car coming, and we were already in the process of running, but we run a little faster. And it sounds like something out of an action movie, but we literally, there was this very, by the stroke of luck, convenient path to our right that we dove into. And then maybe 3 seconds later, this car comes burning around the edge, right? And it was going easily in a very small development, like 40, 50 miles per hour, and would have wiped us the fuck out.
It was literally trying to hit you?
I don't know if he was trying to hit us, but he would have hit us, is what I'm saying. No doubt in my mind. And I look at that and I think about my brain goes to that rabbit hole, right? What if I didn't come that night? What if something obstructed me? What if my mom asked me, no, you got to do your chores tonight, and she had no idea that because I had to do my chores, that all my friends that day would have got hit by a car. Right. Obviously, very extreme thought, but point being is my brain does go down those rabbit holes of like diverging paths. If I wasn't there and I didn't say anything, no doubt someone was getting hit by a car that night.
Right.
And it's crazy to think about that's more butterfly effect shit, but that's where my brain went with what you were saying.
But and there is an argument to be made, if there are more advanced civilizations, that to us it's an impossible thing to think about. But there may very well be creatures out there, or we could evolve into creatures that we're able to look at a situation like Paul Atreides and Dune and go, oh, I see all the ripple effects of this choice. Now make the choice based on the knowledge of those ripple effects. I mean, if you can process enough data fast enough, you could do that,
Yeah. The other thing I thought of a bit was, because you mentioned disconnect to reality, was the way I experience it. And this would be more of a different emotional state, is like, you'll read the news, for example, and like you see, oh, there's a civil war going on in Russia right now. And you just carry on about your day afterwards. Like, yeah, so many things can be going on at once in your life. And yet my world for that stretch of time is totally unaffected. The other thing, Jaffe, you mentioned disconnecting from reality. The one thing that I personally had felt that a bit with, and I don't know if this would vibe with what you were particularly saying, but like I'll read the news, like we'll go on Twitter, social media, see all the things happening around the world. Like I think of, there was Russian civil war trending. I'm like, what's going on? And I literally see like soldiers laid out in the streets and just people fighting amongst themselves. And you kind of go about your day knowing like, I'm so far removed from that. And like, there's two ways you look at that, right? Like, wow, I'm blessed. I'm so far from that awful thing going on. But also there's this like deeply unsettling feeling of almost disconnected from like, well, there's something really bad happening and I just can't do anything about it. It's just happening. And I think it's the concept of reality I struggle with is knowing how many things are going on at once around the world, both big and small. And yet my world can be totally unaffected as if none of it is going on at all. And it's like, well, is this real? Is that actually, I don't see it. Obviously you do. But my point being is like, that's where I feel the disconnect is. I'm like, that's insane. There's civil war. That's insane. But yet it feels like here in New York, as I go into my day to day, I'm lucky to talk about games. I'm like, it's not happening at all. Not that I don't think it is, but like,
yeah, I mean, you are being affected by it in ways that you could discover how and that you'll never know how. Mm-hmm. You're right. On the surface, though, you're not emotionally, consciously hit by it, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's how I personally vibe with what you said there. Colin, I'm curious about your takeaway on everything here.
Yeah, I think what I'm surprised about, well, I'm surprised how flexible my mind has become towards there being more to reality or more to, it's not even like this, like you're talking about a more metaphysical thing even, or you guys are like, I'm fascinated by just the materialized realities and the lies and the propaganda from all aspects, from business and government, et cetera, and other interests that shape our lives. And like you said, and they do it in really limited ways. So the way that it's shaped in this place is totally unaffecting the place far away, which is very targeted and interesting. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by that is the government. And we actually, Jaffe, you and I talked about this recently on another episode of whatever we've done. We've done a lot of episodes together recently, but where I don't think the government's telling the truth about almost anything. That like, I think the government lies about virtually everything meaningful. They obfuscate and they're proven wrong about things over and over and over and over again. And we were talking about COVID and we were talking about Russiagate. And we were talking about all these things in that particular conversation where I'm like, it just doesn't even matter. It's just a machine of lies. And why would it be just limited to that? We were talking earlier on the show. I don't know if we were recording yet, but I think we were, when you had brought up the idea that these alien spacecraft are psyops and I think that's a really interesting idea too. I just don't trust anything. And I'm not really sure what reality actually is. I think a really great example of this, and I've brought this up in the past, is the Ukraine-Russia conflict, where I have no clue what the actual situation on the ground is from an objective point of view. I have no idea. You can do all of the reading you want. You're not going to find out. Like for some reason, this is just totally obfuscated. Like there's no, and because people are so wrapped up in the cause of the war and who is the good guy and who's the bad guy, there's obviously a good guy and a bad guy. We all know the causes of the war, but what's going on there? No one knows. No one knows how many people died. No one knows what.
You don't even really know the cause. Right. Well,
the cause is disputed.
Cause. Well, not only that, but it's like, the thing that blew my mind is finding out, when you're younger, you look at these global occurrences that are man-made and you say, yeah, it's awful or what have you, but clearly somebody at a much higher pay grade is thinking through this stuff and this is what, and then you get old enough and you realize people could be in a war and probably are in a war because the childhood of whoever happens to hold the lever of power at any given moment made them feel a certain way. Like all of Putin's aggressions are clearly coming from a psychological place, I think. Not I'm sure there's strategy there, but it's clear he is a guy dealing with his own mortality. He's dealing with what was his legacy and all these things. And that affects the entire fucking world. And I think the recognition of that, that's a really hard pill to swallow because how many Jews died? None, according to Roseanne, but how many Jews died in the Holocaust because of what? The way Hitler was raised? I mean, think about that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Think about that. I mean, you used to think, or I used to think, that at least there was an awful machine behind it all. And there might be, but our perception of it is just, guy was treated badly by his parents and he became a horrible person, and 6 million people and a lot more died. It almost makes you kind of have to be apathetic. It's like when you watch a video of like a lion killing a gazelle, and you're like, that's nature. We happen to have the awareness to be above it for a little bit and look down and go, oh, this is what's happening. But it's chaos. Maybe the mental health problem is we keep trying to apply some kind of logic to it and some kind of, comforting. And it's like, no, it's just, this is what you do. Just embrace it.
Yeah, I agree with that. There is a level of nihilism to it in the sense that you have to embrace. And like when I'm seeing the White House is like, it just seems like they're always announcing they're giving more and more money to Ukraine. Like just every few weeks, like we're giving this much money to them and this much money. And then they have these things where like, we don't know where $7 billion of it went. And there's just all these things. And I'm like, why is this allowed to happen? Like, it's almost like a control of reality where all of the levers are pulled down. Just nothing it seems like you can do about it sometimes. And we've talked about it in the past, but I really look at COVID as one of those things too. It wasn't a devastating and unfortunate, horrifying thing that clearly came from a Chinese lab that was suppressed forever. But the idea that like the government was telling the truth about it, that they knew what they were talking about, that they weren't vacillating, that they didn't make wrong decisions, they fucked the entire thing up and they got away with it. And that level of like control of reality is just so crazy where you can't.
But it's not
even where we have freedom of expression in the United States, we can't pierce the veil of that level of control where it's like, well, who are Pfizer commercials on all of these different cable news channels. And just it's just crazy to me that there could be so much lying and so much, like I said, obfuscation, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And they lie over and over and over again. And I don't know what reality is from that perspective.
Well, what I was going to say is everybody's lying, though, right? So you can say that, and I don't think you're necessarily wrong, that you can say, oh, the Biden administration lied about this administration lied about that. Trump is literally on audio with, who's the Washington Post guy, the Watergate guy, one of the reporters saying, oh, I knew COVID was awful, but and Bernstein, I think, Woodward or Bernstein. And he's like, yeah, but you said it wasn't. He goes, well, I didn't want to make people scared. And he literally says this on tape that he was lying about how deadly it was, right? Which I'm not saying that was good governing, good leadership, bad or not. But yeah, it's like the government exists to keep the very rich and powerful in power and keep things from falling apart. And they'll pull whatever mechanism they have to pull to do that. And is lying part of it? Of course. When you run a company, I mean, I can't speak to what you do with your employees, but when I've run companies or I've been in a leadership position at big companies, we wouldn't lie like, just to lie. But if we knew, for example, like if a common occurrence is somebody comes in and says, hey, me and my wife are thinking about buying a house. How are we doing as a company? Is this something I should be doing right now? In those cases, you don't want to really fucking lie. You want to be as honest as you can be, but you can't always be totally honest with your employees because you know that it will have ramifications that will actually bring about what they're afraid of, which is being laid off or making less money. If you tell them everything, if you're like, I don't know if we're going to keep this advertiser happy. How's things going, Colin? It's great. Everything's, I'm not saying that's how you do it, but that would be a scenario where maybe you wouldn't want to be totally forthcoming because then, defining Duke, those guys get real nervous and the show isn't as good.
Right.
I mean, so it's like everybody lies and everybody is trying to protect themselves and their families. And there was a great interview the other day that was done with Obama and I forget the guy's name. Who did it. But he asked him, he says, why weren't you more honest, like emotionally honest, like when bad shit happened? And he's like, we would have liked to have seen that. And it was really interesting to hear him say, he's like, you know what? He says, we're all basically chimps and we're greedy and we're scared. And it's not enough to have your banana. You want my banana. I want your banana. It's like to hear a politician at his level acknowledge that underneath all of this, we're still operating meaningfully with our lizard brains. And that's the cause of a lot of this. I don't think the government lies because they're like, fuck you. I think they lie because if they don't lie, we're probably going to have chaos.
Yeah, I agree and disagree with that. I mean, that's a whole nother topic. But
the rich, powerful. I mean, I get that too. Yeah. They want, but the point is, yes, you're right. What is reality? We don't know. And that's just at the real, quote, real level that we can recognize. But all of it's bullshit. I mean, let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Do you not feel that when I say to you that this feels like an illusion? And I don't mean that I'm going to take a headset off when I die and it would have been a VR thing. That's obviously because that's the frame that I frame it through because of my life and what I'm into. But I mean, do you feel that? And maybe that's why people are religious, because they can't really give it a logical reason. So they're okay with the bullshit made up stories. But there is a sense fundamentally, and that may just be an evolutionary thing. We have to have that sense. I don't know. But doesn't this feel artifice to you?
Yeah. Here's what I will say about that is that I think it's clear that we understand so little about what we would perceive as true reality, like what is actually it, that it would make perfect sense to me that we are many levels behind any grasp in getting what is actually real and what isn't. I mean, the entire idea that there's an entire subset of matter and dark matter or whatever that is just not seen is in itself insane. The idea that there's action at a distance with gravity is fucking really weird, right? But it works because it's bending the fabric of space and time. It's like these things we can't even wrap our minds around any of it.
So how do you square it in your day to day? So for me, I disengaged a bit. I stopped caring as much. I didn't become sad. I didn't become depressed, but things mean less to me now. I'm more like observing it, and I'm enjoying the observations. I'm enjoying being part of the play, but now it feels more like a play. Because I don't think once you begin to have those awarenesses, or maybe they're not awarenesses, but perceived awarenesses, it's hard to put that, as they say, the toothpaste back in the tube and just go back to being, I really want that Porsche. It's like, who cares? Really?
I think,
why?
When I look at it, I think it's a product of how information has evolved. I wonder about, you look at like during World War II, you look into the 50s, there was a sense of like real American pride, patriotism, right? I think of like I know it's grounded in fiction, but I think of like Fallout kind of capturing that spirit a little bit of like,
that spirit was also grounded in fiction. It was all propaganda, but continue.
Right. And exactly what I was going to get into is like, if the general American public was aware of something like MK Ultra going on into like the 1970s, would that have been would everyone have been like, I'm so proud to be an American? Not that you can't be one, by the way, because of that shit. But I think because of things, Twitter sucks and Facebook sucks and Instagram sucks and everyone's connected through these.
Yeah.
But everyone has one of these, like the camera, and there's more information than ever where you see through the veil a little bit more often. And because you realize how often you're lied to, you become disenfranchised with your almost whole existence. You're like, What is truth? What is fiction? So I get where you're coming from. Like, you do feel like I'm just trying to live in my own little bubble here, kind of, and just hope no one comes in with a pin and bursts it. For many people,
burst.
Yeah. I think a lot of people prefer the ignorant bliss. I think they prefer to bury their head in the sand.
And that may be an age thing. My guess is you like it the way it is now. Colin is on the bubble going, I don't know if I can trust this. And because I've lived a little bit longer, I'm like, I burst the bubble. I want to know. I want to know what the fuck is going on. I don't mean the truth of the government. I mean the truth of the experience.
I think it's so, I love the idea of that, just in the sense that I think we're far away from understanding anything.
Sure.
Like you were talking about Lex Friedman before, and one of the things that he touches on every so often in his more recent shows that I've listened to, I'm a little bit behind now, but is he talks about how it's fascinating how string theory is wrong. Like it's accepted now that string theory is not right. Like that people don't believe in it, that there's a theory that people never believed in it. I don't know if you've been reading about all this stuff that it's a lot of pop science stuff and like different characters involved like that. I don't even want to say names because I don't know enough to implicate anyone. But people like famous pop scientists that you would know, and this propagation of this idea that simply isn't true. And it goes to show how people, because we're ignorant, I don't know fucking anything about that stuff. You hear it from someone like that, and then you're like, okay, you believe it, and that's all it takes. And then you go through your life and you just believe that that's string theory and 11 realities and all. And it's like, no, that actually they were totally wrong, and there's no evidence for that whatsoever. In fact, it was never provable to begin with. It's more of a philosophy than a science. And so they're moving on to these other things, and I think that. You were talking about the phone, Matty, right? And I'm fascinated by the idea that we all know that we are being spied on by the phone. We all know it. We see it materially showing up in evidence in our phone when we get ads. You don't think that people, first of all, I think people were fired from Amazon for admitting that they listened in regularly on people's Alexas. But the other thing is that they do. They formulate entire things by reading your email. And of course they listen to you and look at your face and all those things. We all know it's happening and we accept it. It's really scary.
You know it's happening so much that you've decided to make money off it. We're going to talk anyway. Why don't you throw some Patreon on my way?
Fuck it. I'm going to monetize it. It's like, I just think that's so interesting that we have no consensus. And I know Congress talks about it every once in a while, but we could say like, you can't do this, but we actually don't.
No, we could say you can't do it.
Bliss, man. You get used to it.
Yeah, like we could make it so that they would be breaking the law by doing that. But it's the same thing when we learned
when you have Marco Rubio being told by people in the military that report to him shit that he doesn't know. The powers that be aren't beholden to the powers that we think are. So you could pass a law.
Well, that's why I think the whole, and again, this is a different topic, but the Snowden PRISM stuff was so crazy. I mean, I think that's so crazy that people still haven't really wrapped their minds around what that was revealing, which was like the telecoms and the internet companies and everyone were just voluntarily giving your information to the government for many, many years in all of this metadata, and they just got away with it. And it's really, really wild, man. So that to me is, I guess what I'm saying is, Jaffe, you're right, that by focusing small, we can kind of control our realities and see what we want out of reality. But the bigger picture, I think, is so beyond us. Like that's why I'm so interested in that guy. Like, what's that guy, Graham Hancock, that does the ancient apocalypse stuff and all of that.
Oh, and like but I watched that after you guys recommended that. That shit's been debunked. I was bothered by that.
Well, they're doing a full, I think, debate on Rogan in October. That will be like the person that's good. Well, so we'll find out about that. But the whole point I'm trying to make is that I think it's clear that we don't understand very much about our past at all. That like we don't understand. We make a lot of assumptions and we trust smart people that make these assumptions, but that's about as far as it can go. It's almost a bespoke and beholden, like forbidden knowledge. And so I would love to know more, but God, man, just listening to RFK recently on all of his interviews, it's so interesting how openly he talks about how the CIA killed his fucking uncle and his dad. He just says it, Yeah. He's like, the CIA killed my,
But doesn't it bother you that any of these people along any political spectrum, because we are so, I never cease to be amazed by how there are smart people willing to push on the pressure points of others in order to gain power and money. So I can't speak to RFK Jr. I've been watching a little bit of his stuff and I know the story you're talking about. And I'm not saying he's doing this at all, or Biden's doing this at all, or it's not a political comment, but they now know there is political power in conspiracy theories. They now know there is political power in building a character that they present public facing as someone who, okay, I'm not quite QAnon, but I'm not going to tell you that what you think is crazy when you feel something else is going on, because they know a lot of people feel that way. And so does RFK Jr. say that because it's genuinely true? Maybe. Does he say it because he knows that he's going to be able to sort of scoop up some of those not quite extreme QAnon folks to his campaign? That wouldn't surprise me either. You know what I'm saying? I mean, how do you know? How do you choose what to believe? The only real choice is to believe that you don't know, right? I mean, isn't that the only sane choice, is to go, I don't fucking know?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a spirituality to it in a sense. Like I personally am bummed that we live in a time, at least ostensibly, where I feel like we're just going to miss some of the truly crazy shit, because we're moving at such an accelerated pace since, let's say, the first industrial revolution, industrial revolution. So talking about the early to mid 19th century, this rate is crazy. If you listen to some of these archaeologists and others that like people like Lex Friedman have on, they always say humanity stayed still for like 300,000 years. Like nothing happened. Like literally nothing happened. Right. The same stone tool technology, the same fire technology, all that stuff, nothing happened. And then suddenly, maybe since, animal husbandry and agriculture, so like 10,000 years ago, but really accelerated since, let's say 1825 or something.
Right.
And it's just getting more and more nuts. I mean, we're in space. We're doing all this kind of stuff.
The best we can do is hope to just fucking survive. Like, I'm not nihilistic about it. I really think we have to go through this. I think it is part of the evolution, and it's going to be, unfortunately, probably bloody and violent. But if we can survive as a species through what it means to have all this data, and then how can we actually responsibly take the data and learn from it and parse it and apply the psychological motivations of people who feed us the data and really become a kind of species that's able to really swim in those waters, I think that's the next step. But we just got to make sure we don't kill. I just wish we could educate ourselves as a whole species and go, guys, I know you're upset. I know you think the Democrats are awful. I know you think they eat babies. And I know Democrats, you think all the Republicans are cartoon characters out of a fucking 1920s, tie the girl to the railroad track and twist their mustache thing. I get it. But we're all being lied to. We have to just survive. Stop being so mad at each other. This is all a response to the crazy that we're swimming in. And maybe we can live long enough as a species to become maybe what we could become. That's exciting. And so I don't feel negative about it, but I don't know if we're really going to make it. I mean, come on. People get so upset. They're so easily led. Mm-hmm. The best thing we can teach kids is don't believe anything.
I have been so easily
led. Be nice. Yeah, I know you have.
Yeah, I have been so easily led.
Everybody has. But the best we can do is just like, you don't know, they don't know. Let's just be nice and let's try to figure shit out and be okay being wrong and be okay being right, not gloat when you're right, and just be fucking nice because this shit's hard.
Yeah.
That would make me happy. So if you're watching Constellations and you want to make me happy, and I know you do, besides watching my own show over at David Jaffe Games on YouTube, what I really think you should do is calm the fuck down and play Elden Ring. Thanks very much, everybody. This has been Colin, MattyPlays, and Dagan. If he wasn't so fucking drunk all the time, he'd still be here. He had technical problems. Yeah. Sure he did. His technical problems was his liver couldn't process all the fucking alcohol. I'm sorry. Sometimes Colin just takes me like the spirit of Jesus, and I have to go with it.
No, it's all good, man. I love it. I think it's awesome. I love your energy.
There's any value to it.
I personally love your energy. I think it's exciting. Right. I'm very satisfied with this episode. I'm sorry that we had some technical issues on the back end. Hopefully they don't portray themselves too much on the front end. We lost Dagan for one of them, but other than that, and who, like Jaffe said, he spun a tale there. It could be true. It could be false. But I appreciate you guys taking the time. I know it was a little longer than we intended. Matty, any closing comments?
Only thing I wanted to add in about us being primitive is I had this thought recently because I'm currently trying to diagnose whether or not I have these vestibular migraines. They strongly believe I do. And so I have to do a lot of balance tests to make sure it's not an inner ear issue. I have to do brain MRI, all this shit. And so I personally thought I was medically well-versed. Oh boy, was I wrong, because now I'm learning, wow, we really are primitive. Some of these fucking things you have to do are so out of the medieval times. It's insane. And it reminded me, I was like, we're advanced in some ways, but I was like, we're still so behind in others. So like the MRI in general, people know, like you just get slotted into this tube. And like in the case of a brain MRI, they put this like cage over your head, headphones on you. It's like almost as if a thought exercise on like, how uncomfortable can we make you? Like even me, who's not a heavy set guy, I'm like this in there.
I have to have drugs to go in an MRI.
I couldn't do it. I have to, they had to give me a sedative, and I have to do a stand-up MRI, which is more of like a open area. Like I couldn't do it. And then, this unlocked something fucking fierce in me, because then I had to do what was a rotary chair balance test, where they, again, something out of medieval times. I walk in the room. I didn't fucking do it because I was like, I know my body now. I was like, I'm not fucking doing this. I walk in. It's literally a octagonal dark chamber. with some little almost torture device chair where you sit in it. They put goggles on you. They fucking clamp your head in place. And you just sit there with these two kind of like analog sticks. They just rotate the chair around and your eyes got to track stuff. Obviously, the goal is to make you dizzy, but you're literally just locked in a dark room getting spun the fuck around. I'm like, this is not science. This is torture. There's got to be ways we get this data in ways that is not from the medieval times. Like next they're going to put me on a fucking torture rack to stretch me out and check something in my intestines.
Think about the medicine, the chemicals for depression. The best I ever heard it described is it's like taking motor oil and pouring it all over your engine or all over when you open the hood, all the stuff that's in there, because they know it works, but they don't exactly know where to put it and how it works necessarily. So
it was my closing thought. It was just like, I totally agree that like we're advanced in some ways, but I just feel like we're not. Like I was one of the, until that set of experiences, I'm like, maybe we're not as advanced as I thought. You know, I'm not expecting us to have flying cars and shit, but like, I thought we were somewhere. But then I see that and I'm like, this is how you test people with my types of problems. This is what we do.
Beats a leech.
I guess so, right?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to rush your closing comments, by the way. I was trying to be mindful of your time, so you can say whatever you need to say. That's totally fine. Jaffe, thank you for your time. I appreciate you. Any closing comments?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I always love coming on. Thanks for putting up with me, my crazy. But it's fun, man. I love talking to you guys. Matty, it was nice to meet you.
Yeah.
What fun to talk about interesting things all day. What an elitist life we lead.
Definitely.
That we consider. It's just like the people in Paris in the 1800s, like, let's sit around and talk about philosophy. And I don't know why they sound like pirate Australians.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But what a fun little life to have, to be able to sit and talk to friends about cool topics. I love it. So thank you guys for having me. And if you enjoyed the crazy, seriously, check me out over at my YouTube channel. I stream 3 or 4 times a week live. A lot of chat interaction, blah, blah, blah. There you go.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you again for your kind words and for being here. Thank you, Matty, again for your kindness. Dagan, thank you for wherever you may be.
Thank you, Dagan.
And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Constellation, Last Stand, etc. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Constellation is a product of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by and is directed and hosted by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is my brother, Dagan Moriarty. The show is produced by Last Stand's executive producer, Dustin Furman, and is edited by associate producer, Ben Smith. All Last Stand theme music is by Ramon Narvaez, and all of our graphics and logos are by Dagan Moriarty. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's podcasts, including Constellation, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest support tier, and we're infinitely grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor.